a beloved father and devoted basketball coach.
Jimmy loved kids.
He loved to talk about coaching basketball and God.
Ruthlessly gunned down in his own home.
There were 10 shell casings. Whoever did this wanted to make sure that he was dead.
Leaving a whole community devastated.
I just started screaming. I literally just lost it.
Detectives follow evidence down a twisted trail.
It was what we call a whodunit. All the doors were locked to some fashion.
There was muddy footprints coming into the foyer area.
To uncover a number of suspects.
He immediately lawyered up. He didn't want to talk about anything.
He had just filed for divorce before he was killed.
Was there some sort of romantic thing gone awry?
And unveil a killer no one could have ever imagined.
They had no remorse, no confessions.
You saying that you killed him?
It shocked me very, very much. This could happen to anybody.
Cordova is a peaceful suburb just east of Memphis, Tennessee. Its wide open spaces and strong church communities make it a haven for families.
Cordova is one of those very safe neighborhood. Kids riding up and down to the bikes. You honk at your neighbor and your neighbor waves.
It's not a place that we're accustomed to seeing violent crimes.
But in the winter of 2013, the town's carefree spirit is disrupted by a troubled call to police.
The initial call came on a Friday morning from the principal at Ridgeway High School.
Jimmy McClain had not reported to work. He was a school teacher and a basketball coach.
Jimmy was always punctual, so when he didn't show up for work, people immediately started worrying about Jimmy.
Our patrol officers go over there and they knocked on the door. Nothing. The front door was locked, the back door was locked, the garage door was shut, all the windows were locked. Nothing appeared to be opened or broke. And then one officer was able to look in through some glass doors. And then he saw something that looked like a shell casing.
Immediately on alert, officers quickly force entry into the home.
As soon as they made entry, they saw a black male on the floor with a lot of blood around him. Dead.
Homicide investigators are on the scene within minutes.
When I first arrived, we see a male victim laying in the den area of the house who appeared to have been shot multiple times.
Whoever did this wanted to make sure that he was dead.
Detectives find a wallet in the victim's pocket. The ID inside confirms this is 49-year-old Jimmy McClain.
The big thing that stood out at that time was the numerous shell casings that were scattered throughout the living portion of the residence.
There were 10 shell casings, and they were all the same caliber, 40 caliber, but they were two different brands. That puts a theory in your head. Was there two shooters, you know, one brand in one gun, one brand in the other? Or was it just one shooter with mixed rounds?
Detectives can find no murder weapon at the scene, but something else grabs their attention.
There was muddy footprints coming into the foyer area, which we knew were not any of our officers' prints.
We were able to lift those prints.
I truly was hoping we could identify the type of shoe and the actual size of the shoe.
There were no signs of fingerprints to the naked eye, so we were able to swab the doorknobs, both interior and exterior on the front door, for the presence of DNA.
An exhaustive search of the house yields no sign of forced entry.
We had no signs of robbery, no signs of burglary. The big thing to me was all the doors were locked to some fashion, meaning someone had locked the door on their way out upon leaving the scene. That told me that most likely our suspect had a key to the residence.
So once we realized that somebody had let themselves in, we're like, well, who's got access to these keys? Did Jimmy know the person who did this?
Detectives also attempt to discover the approximate time the murder happened.
We were able to find out there was a shots fired call that came in our dispatch around 8:50 p.m. 2 days before we found the body.
So started making sense real quick, though, that that's probably when this happened.
As police continue their investigation at the scene, Jimmy's sister, Easter, arrives.
To this day, that is the absolute worst day of my life. It's the day I came around the corner and saw yellow tape around my baby brother's house, who I love so dearly. The police asked me, "Ma'am, do you know who lives here?" I said, "My brother is my brother. Where's my brother?"
Officers confirm Easter's worst fears and tell her that her brother has been killed.
I just started screaming, just started just howling.
Detectives ask Easter and Jimmy's mother, Jamela, to come downtown. Through her tears, Easter tells detectives how young Jimmy grew up to be such a beloved figure.
We grew up in eastern Arkansas. Jimmy is the fourth of 8 kids. He was intelligent, precocious, very athletic.
From a young age, Jimmy McClain had a passion for basketball.
Jimmy walked tall, slender, like a greyhound. He's real tight muscle, flexible, agile.
His nickname was Full Time because he never played half speed. He always played full speed, and that's how he took life.
Jimmy had played basketball with Scottie Pippen. Jimmy considered Scottie Pippen a friend, and I think it was likewise.
After 7 years of professional basketball, Jimmy took up coaching.
Jimmy loved teaching and mentoring. He just was a natural leader with youth.
Jimmy had found his calling, but one part of his life remained unfulfilled.
The thing that he talked to me the most about was his desire to be married.
In the late 1990s, Jimmy met the partner he'd always dreamed of. Her name was Carla.
He was very happy, very excited. He took his relationship very seriously. The next summer, they got married.
Jimmy also became a father to Carla's 2 children from a previous relationship, 16-year-old Tiffany and 11-year-old Dwayne.
He never had children, so he was looking forward to being a father. They all looked up to him as a mentor and as a father, and he spent a lot of time trying to be sure that they were on a good path. He talked to me a lot about the things he was going to do with Dwayne and Tiffany, and he especially wanted to involve Dwayne in summer basketball camps and so forth. He was very serious about being a good husband and a good father.
Together with Carla, Jimmy raised Dwayne and Tiffany as his own. But after 8 years of marriage, cracks started to show in their relationship.
Carla wanted the divorce at first. I do believe that the problems were related to something that occurred early on in their relationship.
Initially, Jimmy had resisted the idea.
I overheard Jimmy telling her that it doesn't make sense for us to be separated. There's nothing wrong, we're not having problems.
But eventually, Carla and Jimmy split up, and after 4 years of separation, Jimmy finally agreed to make it official.
I don't think I really got the full story about exactly what changed his mind and his heart toward her. But he had just filed for divorce a couple of weeks before he was killed.
Detectives are suspicious. Was the timing just a coincidence, or did Jimmy's looming divorce have something to do with his murder?
We immediately thought we needed to talk to Carla.
Had Jimmy and Carla been in some sort of argument or confrontation?
Coming up, detectives unearth disturbing clues.
There had been a scandal at the high school.
Why are these numbers erased during the same time period as the homicide?
And the truth blindsides everyone.
We had found the needle in the haystack.
They had admitted to killing a basketball coach.
Police have just learned that Jimmy McClain filed for divorce 2 weeks before he was killed. And now detectives need to know if animosity between Jimmy and his soon-to-be ex-wife Carla could have been a motive for murder.
We had asked, Carla and Tiffany and Dwayne, her biological children, to come town.
Dwayne and Tiffany wait in the next room while police talk to Carla, starting with her relationship with Jimmy.
She says, look, we were going through a divorce, but it wasn't because he was doing anything bad. She said that we fell out of love.
Carla tells police that when she and Jimmy were married in 2001, Jimmy treated her kids, Dwayne and Tiffany, like they were his own. But as they grew into their late teens, Carla and Jimmy's parenting styles started to clash.
Carla did advise that Jimmy was really hard on her kids. Jimmy was very discipline-oriented, and she always took the side of the kids. In her eyes, they could do nothing wrong. She wasn't going to let Jimmy over-discipline. And some of the issues is what transformed into this growing away from each other.
Detectives ask Carla directly if she stands to gain from Jimmy's death.
She did advise that she had a life insurance policy through her work where Jimmy was on the policy and she would have been the beneficiary.
Was the life insurance payout a motive for Carla to kill Jimmy? Knowing evidence from the crime scene suggests the killer let themselves in. Detectives need to find out if Carla still had access to Jimmy's home.
We actually did ask Carla if she had a key to the house, and she did not have a key that she could remember.
Undeterred, they ask where Carla was on the night of the murder.
She didn't go out and do anything. She said it was raining that night. It was nasty weather. She actually went to her bedroom and read a book. We asked if anybody could verify that. She said, well, my son, Dwayne, because he was at home as well.
To confirm Carla's alibi, police bring in Dwayne and Tiffany, who are waiting in the next room.
When we saw Dwayne, he's a 19-year-old, kid. Dwayne gave a statement advising to us that, when his mom came home, that he just sat and chilled at the house. He didn't have a cell phone, so he would use his mom's. His mom said that she was down in his bedroom. He said he was up in his bedroom, and they needed to see each other the rest of the night.
Dwayne's account lines up with Carla's, but detectives are curious about whether Dwayne had any conflicts with Jimmy.
Tell me about Jimmy. How was y'all's relationship?
It was cool, but we bumped heads a little bit sometimes. He was straight up in the night. He was cool. He fun, loving person.
Dwayne just was like, I can't believe this happened. I don't know who would have done this.
Police turn their attention to his sister Tiffany, and right away sense some tension.
When we interviewed Tiffany, she admitted her and Jimmy butted heads on things, and she actually moved out. She didn't like being parented by him.
Detectives ask where she was at the time of the murder.
Advised she was at home with her boyfriend during the time frame all that Wednesday evening. So at the time we got through interviewing Carla, Tiffany, and Dwayne, there was not anything to lead us to believe that they had any involvement with the death of Jimmy.
To help confirm their alibis, detectives ask for Carla and Tiffany's cell phones.
We were going to use the technology of the cell phone pinging to corroborate where they were the night of the murder.
While they wait for those results, detectives canvass Jimmy's friends and colleagues to find out who else might have had a key to his house.
Early on in the investigation, we had to look at everything. With Jimmy being a high school teacher, with Jimmy being a basketball coach, there was multiple people that could have done this.
We had to start going back to who knew Jimmy. And the first thing we did was work. We spoke with all the teachers. All the teachers liked Jimmy. Other coaches liked Jimmy. The principal liked Jimmy.
Detectives can find no one with a key or even a bad word to say about Jimmy.
He was the kindest, gentlest, most compassionate person that I know. But for somebody to snatch your loved one from you out of their own selfish reasons, it really is heartbreaking, and it makes you mad.
3 days into the investigation, detectives receive Jimmy's cell phone back from forensics and discover that he was texting shortly before he was killed.
He was texting with a female subject, and they were back and forth talking about some directions and basically good night. The last text we identified as a subject named Pam Smith.
The name is new to police, but when they compare the time of her last text with the report of gunshots on the night of the murder, they realize they were just minutes apart. With this new lead, Pam Smith becomes detectives' newest suspect. Who is she? And was she involved in Jimmy's murder?
When you read the text messages between her and Jimmy, the lingering question had to be, was there some sort of, romantic thing gone awry?
Detectives have just discovered that Jimmy McClain was texting with a woman named Pam Smith on the night he was murdered.
We were able to determine that Pam was the last person that Jimmy had contacted.
Investigators need to speak to Pam to see if she has any information that points to the killer.
We called just to say, this is the sheriff's office. Do you know Jimmy? And she was like, yeah, that's my boyfriend.
Detectives inform Pam of Jimmy's murder and carefully gauge her response.
She was extremely distraught. She was like, do I need to come down there? What do I need to do? We still had to figure out who she was. Is she married? Is there an affair situation? Is this a boyfriend, girlfriend situation?
Pam tells detectives that she and Jimmy had only been dating for 6 months.
We were able to sort of dig into the relationship between Pam and Jimmy. What seemed like a healthy relationship.
Pamela claims she was 3 hours away in Nashville at the time of the murder, and she's more than happy to turn over her phone so police can verify her statement.
After talking to her, there was nothing that she gave any kind of suspicion or anything.
Detectives have one more question for Pamela.
We actually did ask Pam if she had a key to the house, and she advised that she did not have a key.
But she says she knows who does.
Pam had overheard a phone call. Jimmy was telling his wife, Carla, that she could come by the house while he was gone to pick up some mail that had come to the house for her. Pam took note that when they left the house, Jimmy didn't leave the mail in the mailbox or on the front door, but he left it inside the house, which told Pam that Carla had a key to the house.
Police believe the killer had a key, but Carla told detectives she didn't have one. The discrepancy raises a red flag.
Is it possible that Carla had a key to the house? How can we prove that she didn't come into the house the night of the murder?
There's only one way to know for sure.
We used the technology of the cell phone pinging to follow her from her work all the way to home.
The cell phone data indicates Carla was home all night, and her daughter Tiffany was too.
Everybody's statements made sense where they were. There was no reason to pursue any other questions with them or Pam at that moment.
Before Carla and Tiffany can be completely ruled out, police must corroborate the calls and texts on their phones with the complete records from the cell companies.
And those can take several days, depending on the circumstance.
A week after the murder, Jimmy's loved ones pay their respects at his funeral.
Jimmy's funeral was held at a local Church of Christ, probably a couple thousand people there. Jimmy touched a lot of people.
Going to Jimmy's funeral was a tough process for myself. So many people loved him.
The mystery of who could have killed Jimmy is on everyone's mind, and grief-stricken loved ones are desperate for answers.
The family was very concerned, but I felt that absolutely the truth would come out.
It was hard waiting and hoping that they get that person before it's too late.
It's very frustrating. After several days, it gets worse. It gets harder to solve, and the family starts to lose hope in you.
The day after the funeral, detectives received the forensics reports.
There was no extra DNA under the fingernails of him to see if he got physically close enough to maybe grab the suspect or anything like that. We didn't get any fingerprints that weren't supposed to be there. Jimmy's prints were the only ones there.
The report isn't all bad news for detectives.
An expert at Nike was able to determine the muddy shoe prints in the entryway of the house. Most likely came from a Nike Air Force One.
These are basketball-type shoes. They're between the size 10 and 11.
Before detectives can follow up on this new lead, their investigation takes a bizarre twist.
There had been a scandal at the high school.
Ridgeway High School had a very good basketball team. They were one of the top in the state. We started hearing about a student at the school who had just recently gotten in some trouble.
Detectives need to know if the scandal is linked to Jimmy's murder. Staff tells them the player at the center of the storm is number 22, Mackenzie Sewell.
Obviously, he was a fairly good basketball player, but he was also 2 years older than people that he was playing with. He was actually an adult, falsified documents to still play high school basketball because he was attempting to try to get a scholarship to play.
A week after Jimmy is found dead, the scandal explodes into the headlines.
This man used a fake transcript to enroll here at Ridgeway High, and our sources tell us the man has a GED, but enrolled here simply so he could play basketball.
A humiliated Mackenzie is kicked off the team and out of Ridgeway High.
The dream of the NBA is over. The coaches were like, oh my goodness, because the whole school gets punished for it. They get disqualified from being able to play.
The scandal raises a key question for detectives. Had Jimmy discovered the truth about Mackenzie and been silenced before he could report him to authorities?
Did Jimmy initiate this whole situation? Because we knew Jimmy was an ethical individual. If Mackenzie thought Jimmy had anything to do with this, then this could be a reason why Jimmy was murdered.
Police are eager to talk to Mackenzie, but that's not going to happen.
He immediately lawyered up. He didn't want to talk about anything.
Detectives try a different approach. They go to speak with the person who registered him at Ridgeway High, his mother, Chandra Nicole. What she tells them is more bizarre than they could have imagined.
What we found out is that was his wife.
Detectives hunting the killer of high school basketball coach Jimmy McClain are investigating whether a scandal involving one of his players is linked to his death. Now they discovered that the player's mother is actually his wife. She admits to helping Mackenzie falsify his age, but says it wasn't Jimmy who had discovered the deception.
She had actually called in to say that he was falsifying records, that he wasn't supposed to be in the school because they had gotten into an argument.
While enjoying his second go-around in high school, Mackenzie began a relationship with a fellow student. When his wife caught wind of it, she told the school about Mackenzie's scam.
It was a domestic situation between him and the wife. Really didn't have anything to do with Jimmy. Didn't fall on Jimmy at all.
Once again, a promising lead evaporates into thin air. And over a week into the investigation, police are starting over.
I was back to square one again. I was starting to question myself and wonder, like, are we gonna get anywhere with this thing?
I was starting to be concerned. I wanted to know when people were going to be charged.
Just as investigators begin to fear the trail growing cold, they receive the complete cell phone records for Jimmy's ex-wife, Carla, and her daughter, Tiffany.
We had ordered direct cell phone records to corroborate the exact records that we had initially dumped. You're talking hundreds, even thousands of records at times to look through, to see if you can find where there's a discrepancy in something.
After days of hard work, police get the break they've been praying for.
Everybody else's phones were making sense, but Carla's phone did not make sense. We noticed there were actually people being texted between 6 and 9, 2 different phone numbers. And that was the time frame of the homicide. Those texts were conveniently erased off Carla's phone. So that automatically piqued interest. So we're trying to identify the 2 phone numbers that were deleted. We identified one of them as a subject named Robert, and then another subject named Heather. We looked up Robert real quick and found out Robert was a convicted felon for dope dealing. But why are these numbers erased the night of the murder? At that point, I felt it necessary to call Carla back in and talk to her again, and then further identify maybe Heather and Robert since we had names on them.
When detectives press Carla about the texts, she tells them they belong to her son and Jimmy's former stepson, Dwayne. Detectives already know that Dwayne uses his mom's phone since he doesn't own one of his own.
Carla said that Heather was a girlfriend. She says, oh, she's a good girl. She's a girl that lives out in Cordova, not too far. Carla said wasn't too fond of Robert, but she did admit he and Dwayne were friends. She says, well, I don't really like him hanging out with Robert too much. You know, he's a troublemaker.
Knowing that Dwayne was texting with a known felon during the time frame of Jimmy's murder is a red flag for detectives. So they asked Dwayne to join his mom down at the station.
The way we approached Dwayne was like, hey, we're having to kind of start over and get a more detailed events of the night. And he advised when his mom got home, he had the phone, he spoke with one of his friends, and then Heather came over.
When detectives finish with Carla and Dwayne, they quickly contact Heather to see if she can confirm Dwayne's story.
She said, I went to Dwayne's house that evening, later that evening. So she has confirmed that she went over there.
It seems like it's another dead end. Yet when detectives follow up with a question about the basketball shoe print found at the crime scene, the interview takes a promising turn.
We asked about the shoes, and she said, oh, Dwayne has these Air Force Ones, and he wears a size 10.5, which fit the crime scene. And at that point, she said, and I remember seeing those Air Force Ones out on the porch, but I hadn't seen them since then. She said, I even have a picture of them. And when she showed a picture, it was a picture of Dwayne staying in the kitchen with a AR-15 rifle and these Air Force Ones.
Police quickly get a search warrant for Carla's home.
searching the closets and everything else, so there's no Air Force Ones in there. There's no shoes that match the homicide. Took pictures of his room, and we left. We didn't come out at that house with anything.
So far, linking Dwayne to the crime has not proven fruitful. But detectives have another strategy.
We know for a fact that there was text messages between Robert and Dwayne during the homicide. We feel that those texts could be very important. Since he erased them off his phone, we couldn't get them. So my goal was to get a search warrant for Robert's phone, hoping that the text messages were still on his phone, visible where we could see them.
While police wait for a warrant to be approved, officers keep an eye on Robert.
I arrived, and within a few hours of setting up surveillance, Robert Collins came out of his house.
At that point, our detectives went to talk to him, and Robert took off running.
Detectives investigating the murder of Jimmy McClain believe text on the phone of convicted felon Robert Collins may point to the killer.
When Robert took off running, he ran a good ways, but we needed to catch him. We didn't want him to destroy his phone or anything like that.
As Robert Collins was running away from the scene, he tossed something.
Our detectives ended up catching him on foot, and when they did, he had a large amount of narcotics.
The illegal drugs give detectives reason to arrest Robert. But even more incriminating is what he tried to discard as he fled.
When we saw that he had tossed a weapon, we immediately thought maybe that was the weapon that was involved.
So in the back of my head, I'm thinking, oh, this is fantastic. Are we gonna solve the homicide right now? You get excited, like, hey, we're there, we're gonna get this.
Police bring Robert down to the station. But before they question him, they carefully examine his gun and phone.
I think it was very quickly determined it wasn't the weapon from the scene.
Still, detectives have plenty of leverage on Robert.
He's a felon convicted with a handgun. Now he's got another handgun on him and a large amount of drugs. This could easily go federal. Maybe that could help us out. Maybe he'd want to work something out. He wouldn't budge on anything. I don't want to talk to y'all. Basically, he said, just put me in the jail cell. I'll go do my time. You just don't get that. That's just not normal.
Is Robert trying to protect his buddy, Dwayne, or just himself? If he won't give anything up, detectives hope his cell phone might.
I was hoping that the text messages were still on his phone. Started going through it. Well, Robert had erased his text too. But what Robert didn't erase were some pictures that we were able to get. The day before the homicide, Robert on his phone had a picture of a handgun. It is a similar gun, a .40 caliber Smith & Wesson Sigma, the same caliber used. What was unique about the handgun was not the handgun itself, but where the handgun was laying. And it was laying on a very unique bedspread. When I saw the bedspread, I was like, I've seen that bedspread before. I said, go get the search warrant pictures from when we picked Dwayne up. Well, as we scrolled through more pictures, we finally found a deleted picture that had Dwayne in front of the bedspread. So it tied it all in with the gun and the picture.
Police now know the gun likely belonged to Dwayne or someone in his inner circle. But who used it to gun Jimmy down in cold blood? Detectives hope to find out from Robert himself.
So when we put Robert in jail, we were hoping Robert would say something on the phone. The first phone call that Robert made was to a young guy. First thing that Robert said to the guy was, hey man, that pit bull, it's real sick. And the guy kind of like I don't think he caught what he was saying. He's like, oh yeah, just laughing. I got you. And Robert, you could see, was very frustrated. Like, no man, I'm not kidding. You need to get rid of that pit bull. It's sick. Bri shouldn't have sold it to you. We did have indication that pit bull was most likely the gun.
And real sick, put it in street terms, means it has a body on it.
Detectives traced the owner of the phone Robert called.
It was a kid named Jamarius that lived in the Cordova area.
We believe that Jamarius Cooper had in his possession the firearm that was used in the killing of Jimmy McClain.
Police get an emergency search warrant and race over to Jamarius's home before he can dispose of the gun.
When we got Jamarius Cooper's bedroom, we systematically started going through places that things could be hidden.
We were going through it, and we weren't finding anything. And then one of my detectives, probably into the 30th box or so, he's like, I got something. And I was like, do what?
When I saw that gun, I immediately felt like we had found the needle in the haystack. We had known through this investigation that most likely we were looking for a very specific gun. That is the same style gun that we're looking for. Same caliber, most likely the same brand, the same model.
At that moment, I was like, Jimmy's here. He's guiding us. He's telling us it's all here. He's not making it easy. He's making this puzzle, but it's slowly coming together. So immediately took the gun and had TBI process it. Within a couple hours, they were calling us back on, hey, this is the gun that was used in the homicide of Jimmy McClain. That does bring some emotion to you. You're like, oh my gosh, this work, this time, and we're going into 30 days here. I mean, nobody finds a gun used in a homicide in 30 days.
Police need to talk to Jamarius, but before they can track him down, they get an alarming call.
We have a call from Cumberland County Sheriff's Office, and the deputy there said, hey, listen, we just had something weird come in. A white female came running into our station. She was very distraught. She was in her pajamas, and that she said that she wanted to pass on some information, that her husband was upset because his nephew had admitted to killing a basketball coach.
Detectives investigating the murder of Jimmy McClain have just received an unexpected call from a sheriff's office 5 hours away.
And the deputy there said a white female came running into our station. Her husband was upset because his nephew had admitted to killing a basketball coach. Her husband was Carla's brother, which was Dwayne's uncle.
Detectives are stunned. Dwayne's uncle is Donald Page, a known felon. Detectives bring him in, knowing they may only have one shot to get him to talk.
He was I'm not talking to y'all, I ain't got nothing to say.
Police remind him of one simple fact. If he's withholding information, that makes him an accessory to murder.
And all of a sudden, he said, look, my nephew said he did it.
Dwayne had, in fact, taken him aside and said, Uncle, had to handle my business. And Donald said he looked at him and said, are you saying that you killed him? Dwayne said to him, I had to stand up for my mom.
Dwayne, he loved his mom. They were having some financial issues, and Dwayne thought that if this divorce could just be done with, I could get the money from the house. And I think Dwayne took it upon himself to do whatever he wanted to do, and which unfortunately led to the homicide.
There was tension between Jimmy and Dwayne already. So there was that divorce, money, financial implication, motive.
With an accessory charge hanging over his head, Donald agrees to testify against his nephew.
At that point, I called the prosecutor and told him what we had, and he said, I think it's time to go lock up Dwayne Moore for homicide.
On March 26, 2013, Dwayne Moore is charged with the murder of his own stepfather.
I'm telling you, he just had no remorse, no confessions. He just didn't have any care in the world whatsoever.
When I heard Dwayne had been charged with Jimmy's murder, I felt a lot of relief.
I was shocked to know that someone that he had influenced this long in this young man's life that would take his life.
I went deep to my core as far as emotionally. This was unbelievable because of who Jimmy was.
14 months later, Dwayne Moore stands before the Memphis judge and jury. The prosecution lays out what they believe happened the night of the murder.
Dwayne had it in his head that he was going over there to kill him. He knew that there was a key to the house that Carla might have forgot about. I think he waited until he saw Jimmy pull in, let himself in that front door. Pulled the gun out as soon as he saw Jimmy and started shooting. I think he did it in about 5 minutes at the most. I think he just went in there and started blasting away.
To try to imagine what Jimmy must have gone through in the final moments that he was living is extremely painful. The awful terror he must have felt, knowing that his life was about to end.
On June 27, 2014, Dwayne Moore is convicted and sentenced to 22 years in prison without the possibility of parole.
It hurts. It hurts that somebody thought so little of my family, that they could take somebody so precious to us.
While Jimmy's family still misses him every day, his love for educating young people lives on.
To honor Jimmy's memory, we established a scholarship in his name at the University of Arkansas at Conway.
I think Jimmy would want to be remembered by being a godly man, a kind man, and a peaceful man.
That's what helps me to try to let the anger go. Don't be mad. Just thank God that he was here and that he was my brother for as long as he was. I miss him and I love him.
For more information on an unexpected killer, go to oxygen.com. A beloved taxi driver.
Raphael was a hardworking guy. He always tried to do better and better and better.
Is murdered in cold blood.
That's when they observed a body inside of the trunk.
There were 9 gunshots. That's not an accident.
We had no leads, we had no suspects, had no idea who could have done this to him.
Police uncover a sinister trail of motives.
A lot of people was jealous of Raphael.
Raphael tended to like the ladies a little bit.
Raphael had approximately $2,000 in his vehicle.
But struggle to find suspects.
People were asking, do we have to be scared? Is there a murder out there killing us Hispanics?
We noticed on his license plate of his vehicle, there appeared to be a blood stain.
Until the bizarre truth turns the case on its head.
were calling him through the loudspeaker, trying to get him to come out of the house, which turned into an hours-long standoff.
When that fingerprint came back with a second person, it really blew it wide open.
We knew he was at the scene.
That was a bombshell. That was a game changer in terms of the criminal prosecution. Ultimately, to come back to these two people was something that we never saw coming.
Rogers County, Oklahoma, a quiet rural district north of Tulsa's city limits.
Rogers County is just a great, tight-knit community.
It's a agricultural community, a very wholesome, family-oriented community.
That all changes in the early hours of May 1st, 2015, when a truck driver sees something unusual beneath a bridge.
Our dispatch center received a call of a vehicle partially submerged in the Caney River off Highway 169.
Police and firefighters arrive at the scene in minutes and cordon off the area. Emergency crews check to see if anyone is trapped inside.
The news media was there, and it was being broadcasted over live TV.
As the car is towed onto the riverbank, its trunk pops open.
That's when they initially observed a body inside of the trunk.
At that point, we knew we had a serious crime at hand.
Rogers County Sheriff's detectives arrive and begin their investigation.
When I arrived on scene, I observed a Hispanic male inside of the trunk.
These pockets look like they've been rummaged through.
Only when detectives move the victim's shirt do they realize the violent nature of the attack.
He appeared to have several gunshot wounds to his chest area.
There were 9 gunshots. That's not an accident. 9 gunshots is intentional.
Somebody wanted to make sure that he did not survive his injuries.
The first question facing detectives is who is the man in the trunk?
We did not locate any type of identification or any wallet or anything that a normal person would have in his pockets.
So it made it very hard for us to identify who he was. We were taking photographs of his tattoos and unique markings on his body.
Inside of the vehicle, we found some cell phones.
As the car was submerged, we got lucky that one of the cell phones was placed on the dash and it was fully intact, still operational.
The detectives and forensics team comb the riverbank for further clues.
We noticed a large amount of blood, and we suspected that was the area that the victim was initially shot. Well, near that pool of blood, we also found some shell casings consistent with the size of bullet wounds inside the deceased's body.
A few feet away, detectives notice more clues.
There was several beer cans and a cigarette butt and a piece of tissue.
I was told that a family member had showed up and seen his brother's car on the news, and he said, yes, that's my brother's car.
The young man's brother is Rafael Hernandez Torres, a taxi owner serving customers in Tulsa's Hispanic community.
I showed him a photograph of a tattoo that I had taken from the victim's body. That Oscar immediately identified the tattoo belonging to his brother and then began sobbing and crying because at that point we told him that his brother had been murdered.
It broke my heart. When I seen the pictures, it felt like the whole world just kind of ended.
Oscar called me. When I found out Raphael got shot, I didn't know how to react. I was just shocked. I was like, how?
Rafael Hernandez Torres was born outside Mexico City on October 22, 1976.
As a kid, he was a rebel.
Growing up, he was always riding his bike from town to town.
He loved to go and get to know people from other places, get to know other cities. He just loved to travel everywhere.
When Raphael was 20 years old, his parents moved him and his siblings to the U.S. As one of the oldest sons, Raphael helped support the family.
It was difficult to move to a different place that we didn't know, and we had to start from zero.
Raphael was the big brother. And as soon as we got here, Raphael told us to get straight to school, learn the language, and just keep on going. Raphael was a hardworking guy. He always tried to do better and better and better.
As a young man, Raphael's warm personality attracted others.
He was so friendly with everyone, especially ladies.
Raphael was enterprising too, turning his passion for travel into a career.
Raphael started his taxi business with one car. From there, it kept on going and going.
Raphael was known in Tulsa's Hispanic community as someone willing to help anyone in need.
Raphael cared about everybody. If he saw you down, he'll try to help you. If he saw you homeless, he'll get you a room and get you a shower and help you out.
He knew people who didn't have anything to eat, and he helped them out. Raphael had a great heart.
What would lead anyone to take Raphael's life so violently on that riverbank?
Everybody knew him. Everybody liked him. He did a service to his community, always gave back to his community. At this point, we're thinking, why would somebody kill him?
At the crime scene, detectives ask Oscar and Juan what they know about Raphael's last hours before his body was discovered in the river.
Raphael called me and told me that he was going to Texas, but the next day he didn't call me, which was strange because he was always calling me every time he went out of state.
Police ask if Oscar and Juan know why anyone might want to kill their brother.
We learned that Raphael was known to carry approximately $2,000 on him at all times.
Whoever did this took his ID, took his wallet, took any money he may have had. So that led to the possible motive that Raphael had been killed for the money.
Oscar gives the detectives one more useful piece of information.
Oscar told us that some of Raphael's vehicles had been vandalized where Raphael ran his business.
A lot of people was jealous of Raphael because he was really successful in the business that he was doing.
Had the beloved taxi driver made a lethal enemy in his community?
We had no leads, we had no suspects, had no idea who could have done this to him.
This wasn't just a disagreement or something. It was a very violent act.
I had a lot of questions about Raphael. Why? Who? Why would they kill him? What did he do?
This is not a random killing. This is someone who targeted Raphael and wanted him to die.
Coming up, detectives uncover a tangled web of romantic interests.
Not only does he call her frequently and go by and see her, but I know he bought her flowers.
She had an unusual relationship with her ex-husband. They both still slept in the same bed.
So a scorned husband, that could fit right in with that. Now we're starting to think this could be a motive.
And a surprising lead sends the case in a new direction.
We were shocked when we found a second individual's fingerprint at the scene.
After discovering Rafael Hernandez Torres shot dead and stuffed into the trunk of his own taxicab, detectives are trying to establish if it was a robbery gone wrong or if he'd been targeted by someone with a grudge.
We were trying to see if we could locate who had vandalized Raphael's vehicles, see if there's anyone that had a motive or a reason to harm or murder Raphael.
Detectives are also on the lookout for vehicles spotted near the bridge on the night of the murder.
We established a tip line, and we got that number out to the news outlets.
We received multiple tips from passerbys describing that they saw a truck on the side of the highway, a black SUV on the side of the highway, and then a silver car on the side of the highway.
So we initially started looking for vehicles that could match that description in the hopes that we could run a name.
Next, investigators head to the heart of Tulsa's Latino district, where Raphael based his business.
The area of 21st and Garnett and Tulsa is a predominantly Latino community. Right at the heart of that is Santa Cecilia Plaza.
There's grocery stores, there's hair salons, ice cream parlors, where the Hispanic community gathers with their families.
The Plaza Santa Cecilia, it's a place to go if you're Hispanic most of the time. Something's always happening.
Raphael parked his vehicles outside of the Mercandito and also right next to the ice cream shop.
Raphael spent every day walking around talking to these people.
Raphael gave rides to people that needed them. He helped translate, and he's just well known in his community as a person always giving back and helping. Very kind and loving person.
Raphael always said that's what he loved to do. He loved, helping out people.
Detectives canvass Raphael's friends at the plaza.
They were shocked that he was murdered and killed. And they were heartbroken.
Was there anyone who had a reason to want him dead?
It was well known in that community that Raphael had money, that he carried money with him.
We spoke with Roman, who was considered a maintenance man around the area.
We spoke with Felipe, who owned a grocery store, as well as Adon, who ran the ice cream cart.
Adon came into contact with Raphael multiple times in a week as he pushed that cart up and down those businesses.
We actually learned that people seemed to really like Raphael. No one really seemed to have a motive to want to harm him.
As detectives continue searching the plaza for leads, they gain access to Raphael's cell phone records.
So initially, we had the physical phone. I drafted a search warrant to try to extract as much data as possible from that phone. Raphael was talking to multiple people between 9:15 and 9:30. So we know that he's alive at that point, or he wouldn't be answering his phone. And then after that time period, he doesn't answer any more phone calls.
It's always important when someone has been murdered to find out who they talked to last. One of the numbers that we had identified on Raphael's phone belonged to a female named Letty. Letty worked at a laundromat near where Raphael kept his vehicles. We found out through Oscar that Raphael and Letty may have had some type of relationship. Raphael would frequent Letty's place of business at the laundromat and would go by to see her.
Not only does he call her frequently and go by and see her, but I know he bought her flowers. He took little gifts up to her. He took her to Dallas one time for one of his fairs. They drove to Dallas and then drove right back.
There's one more thing about Letty that gets the officers' attention.
We also discovered that Letty was married.
As officers dig into this new lead, Raphael's autopsy results come in.
Raphael was shot 3 times in the front and 6 times in the back.
There's a mindset behind somebody shooting somebody that many times. It tells you that this is a crime of passion. It's not just something that just happened.
So a scorned husband, that could fit right in with that. Now we're starting to think this could be a motive.
Had Letty's husband killed Raphael in a jealous rage? Detectives decide to get some answers from Letty.
So we went to interview Letty, and Letty was not very forthcoming.
We had talked to her about her relationship with Raphael. What is that? What is that relationship? She told us that they were just friends.
Letty did deny being in a relationship with Raphael.
We learned after speaking with Letty that she had not been truthful to us. She did not provide a correct date of birth, did not provide her correct address.
At the station, detectives search Letty's name in the police database.
We later learned Letty's true address and her true date of birth. In doing so, we discovered that Letty had an outstanding warrant.
So obviously, we're on high alert with her because she's trying to deceive us.
Knowing that we've been lied to, we want to observe Letty's comings and goings, so we'd start conducting surveillance on Letty's home.
As detectives stake out Letty's home, their attention is drawn to a vehicle.
As we arrived, we saw a vehicle pull in that was almost an exact match to one of them mentioned in the tip line.
He's driving a black truck with a silver stripe on the back of it. And that was a possible vehicle we were looking for.
Detectives investigating the shooting of taxi driver Rafael Hernandez Torres believe his friendship with laundromat worker Letty could have sent her husband into a jealous rage.
First thing we decided to do when looking into Letty and her husband was we went to see who her husband's talking to.
Then a truck pulls up in Letty's driveway that matches a vehicle spotted near the scene of Rafael's murder.
So from there, we decided that we're going to make contact with the individual in the truck.
Officers confront the truck's owner, who claims to be the friend of Letty's husband, Mario.
Rogelio was basically crashing on Mario and Letty's couch, and they were putting him up for several weeks.
While speaking with Rogelio, we noticed on his license plate of his vehicle that there appeared to be a blood stain.
And there's a bloody fingerprint on the tag of the truck. Looking under the truck, and there's a piece of tissue that is kind of consistent with tissue that we found at the scene.
Is this the evidence detectives have been searching for? They search the house and see what else they can find.
During the search of that home, we did find a firearm inside the home. We submitted that to the state crime lab.
We had a victim that had been killed, put into the trunk of his vehicle, and then that vehicle was subsequently pushed into the river. It was a very narrow window of time that all this happened in. So in most of the investigators' mind, it's a very good possibility that there's two people involved in this. Well, we got what we believe could be the possible vehicle. We have evidence that Letty's husband and this friend of his could be our suspects. And we're thinking this is the big crack to the case that we've been looking for.
Police bring Mario and Rogelio in for questioning. They ask Mario about Rafael. Had the taxi driver's advances on Letty made him a target?
Mario was familiar with that Rafael had bought his wife flowers and was known to stop by her place of business frequently, but he did not seem to be very upset by that.
Mario insists that he was never jealous of Rafael because he and Letty are divorced.
We had discovered that Letty had an unusual relationship with her ex-husband. They both still lived in the same house. They lived there with their children. They even slept in the same bed.
She was kind of out seeing people. He didn't care.
Mario also insists that he was at home asleep on the night of the murder. Rogelio gives the same alibi, insisting that he never left the house that night.
Their alibis were not really solid. We were worried about them being co-conspirators, so at the time, we weren't putting just a whole lot of stock into that.
Officers press Rogelio about the blood on his license plate.
But we talked to him about the blood on it, and he's got a good excuse for that. He cut his finger trying to put the tag on, and the bloody fingerprint is his blood. They were more than willing to provide their DNA and fingerprints to clear themselves.
Despite officers' suspicion of Mario and Rogelio, the lab results tell a different story.
We have DNA from the scene, and Rogelio and Mario don't possess that DNA.
The firearm inside the home did not match bullets that we found in Rafael.
And based on their phone numbers, they weren't at the scene. We found zero evidence linking them to the crime, and that whole theory really started to fall apart quick. We were going back to the drawing board and we were starting over again.
We weren't sure on where to go from here other than talking to the community. It was very frustrating during this point.
With each passing day, pressure to solve the case is only increasing.
People were asking, do we have to be scared? Is there a murder out there killing us Hispanics?
My whole family was worried because they didn't want me doing the taxing business because they didn't want me to be the same as my brother.
At a crossroads in the investigation, police find a new way forward when they gain access to further cell phone records from the night of the murder.
One of the last contacts that Rafael had was a fare that was supposed to be getting a ride to Texas later that night, and Rafael never showed up.
But there's one other number that we know is also communicating with Raphael at around the time of his death.
Raphael was scheduled to pick up an individual and told him that he was going to be late because he had another job.
Raphael had told him that he was going to help a friend who had gotten into an accident, and he was going to go translate for him to the police. We know that phone conversation took place around 9:15, and we believe that around 9:35 that Raphael was murdered.
Had Raphael been lured to his death by a call from someone he knew?
As we start diving into the call detail records on that phone number, we're able to follow the tower information and the location of that phone to the scene of the crime.
We were able to track Raphael's phone and the suspect phone, both going to the same area. However, Raphael's phone didn't leave, and the suspect phone went back to Tulsa.
This was very important to us because we knew that this was the possible killer that enticed Raphael to where he ultimately was shot and killed.
That's when we make the decision to focus everything on that number.
When police try to identify the phone's owner, there's a problem.
We get subscriber information for the phone number, and it comes back to a fictitious name.
The number was on a prepaid phone. It wasn't attached to any particular person.
That number was very important to us, especially after seeing the lengths that the individual went to hide their identity. We felt very strong that this number was going to belong to the killer.
And so investigators had to start looking at other ways of identifying who this phone belonged to.
We started to get call detail records for that number.
And they started contacting people that were in contact with the cell phone.
We were able to pinpoint a phone number from someone that talked to the suspect phone several times close to the time of the killing.
The phone number belongs to a man named Marco Lara.
But once we got the name from Marco Lara, we started running a criminal history check, and we find the drug charges, some firearms charges, stuff that we were interested in when you're looking for a violent killer. We knew that Marco knew who possessed our bad guy's phone number because he had been calling it.
Marco ran with some of the same people in that area that Raphael had contact with. And so we really felt like Marco was going to be a good spot to gain some information.
We went to the area of the plaza. Marco lived one street over, and we staked out his house. We saw a truck pull into his driveway, and he gets out of the driver's seat, and he walks into the house. So we get out, and we start covering exits to make sure that he isn't leaving. But that's when things went south.
2 weeks after cab driver Rafael Hernandez Torres is found shot dead in the trunk of his car, police are about to confront Marco Lara, a man they believe may know the identity of the killer.
We went there to make contact with Marco. He refused to come to the door.
We're calling him out through the loudspeaker, trying to get him to come out of the house, which turned into a standoff. We established a phone connection. There was a woman and children in the house, his family, and we're requesting for him to come out. And this goes on for a long time. Eventually, his wife and children come out, and we believe, that it's just him in the home.
There was a several-hour standoff with him in which he ultimately gave up and came outside and surrendered.
Police take Marco into custody and begin their interrogation.
Initially, we were thinking, this is a bad guy. He's got criminal history. He's actively resisting us coming and arresting him. We're thinking, okay, this could very well be an associate of our killer, if not possibly involved.
But cell tower phone records prove otherwise.
But once we got him arrested, we were able to determine that his phone as well had not traveled to the area where Raphael was killed.
If Marco is not involved, then why had he resisted arrest?
He has an outstanding warrant.
He's doing whatever he can to keep from going to jail.
No longer a direct suspect, Marco still has information valuable to the investigation.
So we had seized his phone. We had his phone. I typed in our suspect's number, and he said, that's him.
That number belonged to Roman Medrano, who lived in Tulsa.
Marco provided us the apartment complex that Roman lived at.
So knowing that Roman Medrano was the owner of that phone, we sat at the apartment complex and we figured out what apartment he was in.
And the next morning, we served a search warrant on that apartment.
When detectives search the apartment where Roman Medrano lives with his wife Blanca, they're surprised by what they find.
As we entered the residence, I noticed there was no furniture. It appeared that Roman maybe didn't have a lot of money. Maybe he was struggling to pay his bills.
We find that there's very little in the way of furniture, and it looks like things are being sold off. There's IRS paperwork scattered about.
Searching through Blanca's purse, officers make a discovery that raises their suspicions further.
There was approximately $2,000 in her purse. Rafael had approximately $2,000, in his vehicle. And now our suspect's wife has this large sum of money in her purse that is pretty close to the amount.
We had the one suspect number that we had determined to belong to Roman Medrano. At that point, we felt we had enough to bring Roman and his wife in for questioning.
At the police station, detectives first interview Roman's wife, Blanca.
Blanca initially denied knowing who Rafael was.
Blanca told us that she was not given a ride by Rafael, that Roman has nothing to do with this.
Then how to explain the $2,000 in her purse?
Roman doesn't have any money. He's worried about losing his roof over his head. It's well known in the community that Rafael carries lots of cash with him. So I don't think it was any secret that by killing Rafael that Roman could get a payday out of that. Blanca basically told us that Roman was with her the night of the homicide, that he's always home.
In another interview room, detectives question Roman.
Roman told us that he did not know Rafael, that he didn't know that his wife knew Rafael, that he had never been to the area where the homicide occurred. Roman denied every aspect of any knowledge of the case whatsoever.
Roman just heard of Rafael's taxi service and that he was, doing work in the Hispanic community.
But detectives have information that suggests a closer connection.
Shortly after the first interview with Marco, he reached out to us and gave us more information about Roman. Marco told us that he had overheard Roman and another individual talking about how Rafael had given Roman's wife, Blanca, a ride in this taxi cab to the Tulsa County Jail.
Pressed further, Roman admits to knowing more about Rafael than he first let on.
Rafael had a successful business and tended to like the ladies a little bit.
Roman did not like the fact that she was taking rides with Rafael.
He still wasn't willing to tell us that he was, at the scene of the crime.
Confronted with Roman's admission that she'd taken rides with Rafael, Blanca's story begins to change.
Now she knows Rafael. She's telling us that they had talked, they knew of each other.
Blanca began to tell us that during one of her rides with Rafael, that he came on to her and that she believed that it was inappropriate and told Roman about it.
We had learned that Rafael had made comments to Blanca as trying to hit on her, and that this was very upsetting to Roman. Blanca described Roman as a very jealous man.
Had something happened between Rafael and Blanca that triggered Roman to seek revenge?
Based on how many times they were shot, and there was a personal element to this, we believe that Rafael's conduct towards Roman's wife could have been a motive to kill him. At this point in the investigation, we definitely feel like we have our guy.
"17 days after Rafael Hernandez Torres' murder, police are investigating husband and wife Roman and Blanca Medrano.
There were two angles that led us to Roman. One was jealousy. We knew that Roman was aware of Raphael giving a ride to Blanca.
Roman believed that Raphael disrespected his wife by coming on to her as she described, which would indicate a motive behind Raphael's killing.
But we also knew that Roman was struggling financially. And we had every reason to believe that Roman would know that Raphael carried money with him.
We definitely feel like we've got probable cause to arrest him. We feel like we have our guy. We don't know if there's another individual at this point, but we know we've got at least one of them.
Under questioning, the couple remains adamant in their denials.
Roman would never come out and tell us the truth.
Roman told us that he had never been to the area where the homicide occurred. Blanca gives us an alibi for Roman and says that he's at the house with her. We knew that wasn't true because it was Roman's cell phone that was at the scene. We got the overlay of suspect location from the cell towers. We knew the possessor of that phone was involved in this killing.
Was it possible that someone else had Roman's phone on the night of the murder?
We had the evidence from the cell phone that Roman talked to Blanca 20 times the night of the homicide. If you're sitting right next to him, why are you calling him that many times? And she says, I'm not. So things started to change. Now we have actual evidence from, the mouth of his own wife that what he's saying isn't true. So to this point, we have a very compelling circumstantial case. We've got the cell phone records, we have motive.
Police take Roman's fingerprints and swab him for DNA.
And then we get the information back from their crime lab, and we find DNA from the scene on a beer bottle that belongs to Roman Medrano.
The DNA evidence that came back to Roman Medrano really firmed up the case against him. It went from a very circumstantial case to a really good case.
Police are ready to charge Roman with murder, but know the case is far from airtight.
There was no murder weapon. We didn't have an eyewitness to it. We knew that proving it in court was going to be very difficult to do.
Then, as detectives go back carefully over forensic reports from the state crime lab, they find something unexpected.
We were shocked when we found a second individual's fingerprint at the scene.
When that fingerprint came back with a second person, it really blew it wide open.
This fingerprint affirmed our suspicion that there was more than one person involved in the killing.
That was a bombshell. That was a game changer in terms of the criminal prosecution, because now we had an eyewitness.
That print came back to a guy by the name of Adon Mora. Adon Mora was a member of the community there in the plaza.
This fingerprint came back from the Department of Homeland Security when Adon Mora was deported previously.
Adon Mora was known as the Ice Cream Man.
When I found out that the Ice Cream Man was involved, it was a shock because you don't expect someone to be that person.
Why would Raphael's friend, the ice cream vendor, turn against him?
We knew he was at the scene. We knew he knew the victim. We knew he knew the other suspect. Marco Laura told us that Adon and Roman were pretty tight. I mean, they spent a lot of time together.
The consensus amongst the investigators is that it was more than likely a two-reason motive. One, they were in dire straits, needing money. And two, that Raphael had disrespected Roman in talking to his wife, Blanca. At that point, we issued a warrant for Adon Mora. However, we did not have a location as where he was at.
We spoke with an individual that told us that he had gotten scared about a criminal investigation and that he had went up north.
But we did find that he was on Facebook. We wrote a search warrant to Facebook, and Facebook provided us a probable location of Adon.
We were able to locate those IP addresses into a suburb of Detroit, Michigan. It gave us about a 3-block area.
Detectives contact U.S. Marshals, who take Adon into custody within a matter of hours.
I read Adon his rights. While speaking with him, he acted as if he was not close to Raphael in any way. When I asked him specifically if he had been to the area of the Caney River, he stopped the interview and requested that his attorney be present.
Hearing of Adon's arrest, Roman requests another interview with police.
During that interview, Roman was trying to give me scenarios where Adon had perpetrated this crime, and Roman was just trying to give him a ride, had no idea what was going on.
Told that Roman has pinned the blame on him, Adon decides to cooperate and tell his side of the story.
Adon eventually agrees to speak with us and said that Roman had owed him money and that he had a way to get him his money back.
Adon says that the night of the homicide, Roman tells him that he needs Adon to come with him and that he was going to get him the money. So Adon gets in the vehicle with Roman. Roman stops. They get a pack of beer and they drive down to the riverbank of the Caney River.
Had Adon just signed on to help Roman kill Raphael? If so, which one of them fired the gun?
There's a lot of things that we don't know at this point.
We had two people that we could put at the crime scene, but we didn't know who the trigger man was.
We felt confident that we could prove that Roman Medrano was there and was a part of the crime, but Roman was trying to give me scenarios where Adon had perpetrated this crime. Adon is doing his best he can to separate himself from the crime.
It's extremely important for the family members that we get justice for them. This was an incredibly violent crime, and we wanted the person that pulled that trigger.
When I found out Raphael was slurred out because someone needed help, it was just horrible. Why would you lie to him like that?
We wanted a conviction for the community, for the family, so we requested that Adon take a polygraph. There's no way that we can give Raphael back, but what we can do is solve the crime and send the perpetrators to prison.
Police now have two suspects in custody for the shooting of Rafael Hernandez Torres, Roman Medrano, and Adon Mora Ramos.
Ultimately, to come back to these two people was something that we never saw coming.
Adon's unexpected involvement in the murder gives police a valuable way to secure a conviction. To ensure he's telling the truth, police have Adon submit to a polygraph test.
During the interview with Adon, he explained to us that Roman wanted him to be at a certain location to help him with a job of some sort.
They went out to the area where the homicide had occurred, and they were there drinking some beer and just hanging out.
Adon doesn't really know what's going on. He's asking Roman, what are we doing? How are we going to get this money? Well, Roman keeps walking off, and he's on the phone. He makes a phone call where Adon can't hear him. After a period of time, Adon sees Raphael's silver car pulling down where they're at.
Raphael believed that he was going to help a friend who had gotten into an accident.
It was Roman's cell phone that made the call to lure Raphael out to the rural secluded area.
According to Adon, Raphael drank a few beers with them, and then Roman asked for his help jump-starting his car.
Roman directed Raphael's vehicle to pull down and give him a jump. Roman tells Adon to take the jumper cables and hook them up to the cars.
Adon tells investigators that what happened next took him by surprise.
Adon is trying to hook up the cables under the hood of the car, and he hears the gunshots. He looks up and says that he sees Roman standing over Raphael, and that Raphael has been shot several times. Adon fingers Roman as the triggerman, as the actual killer.
The polygraph test confirms that Adon is telling the truth.
That was the last piece of evidence that we needed. The information that he gave was truthful. And it became clear that Roman was really the one that had a personal vendetta against Raphael and the financial motive for it. But we knew Adon participated. We knew he helped out with it. Adon admitted that he put Raphael's body in the trunk and helped push the vehicle into the river. And Adon said he was afraid that Roman was going to shoot him as well.
Adon never says anything about the money. Adon just says he's worried that he's going to be next. Now, he's a witness to this crime.
And so Adon, because of that fear, fled the area shortly after the crime had happened. Ultimately, we charged Adon with accessory and gave him a 15-year sentence. Adon was there. He could have stopped this, and he didn't. He could have cooperated, and he didn't. So he needed to go to prison. Roman entered a plea of no contest to murder in the first degree, and the judge sentenced him to life in prison with the possibility of parole.
When this investigation started, it was a true whodunit. We weren't certain on who was involved or why they would want Raphael killed.
For such a violent act to be committed over a couple $1,000s and an offhand comment to Roman's wife is unexplainable.
It was a cruel and unusual way of getting back at somebody for being jealous and wanting the things that he had.
Raphael was a generous man, a benevolent man, and they took advantage of that. They knew that he would be willing to help them, and they used that good nature against him and ultimately lured him out there and murdered him.
My whole family feel relieved because we finally got justice from my brother, Raphael, because his dad didn't go in vain.
My feeling and thought about these people was always like, why? Why? What problem did they have with Raphael? I don't know.
Today, the Hernandez-Torres family does everything they can to keep Raphael's memory alive.
Raphael was like a role model for everybody. He was the biggest role model for me because he showed me, even when I'm down, to always get up and fight for what I like.
We just love for Raphael to be remembered as a crazy, funny, flirtatious guy who thought of helping other people. It's always something or someone who remembers Raphael and talk about his life, and we just all start crying. And we wish he was still here, but he's still with us.
A self-made couple making plans for the next stage of their lives.
They were getting ready to have a quiet retirement.
They were such a beautiful couple. They would give you your shirt off their back.
They had a lot of friends and loved spending time with family.
Gunned down, execution style, in their own home.
It just seemed to make no sense. Who would do that, and what could possibly be the motive?
While searching for the killer, investigators uncover a world of greed and deceit.
We looked at desperation. She was desperate for money.
He felt he had been treated badly, basically kicked to the curb.
People were saying that he was very upset. It's certainly his motive.
A series of chilling discoveries.
We learned that he was receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Everything he's told us is a lie.
Points to a killer no one ever imagined.
People were shocked.
It shows what a messed up psyche he's got.
It was unbelievable how somebody can be that cold-blooded.
On the outskirts of La Crosse, Wisconsin, lies the prestigious neighborhood of Berry Mills. In early spring of 2010, this quiet community is rocked by a disturbing 911 call.
911, what is the address to the emergency? Okay, what's going on?
I'm at my mom and dad's house. I came out to check that on the...
Your dad is what?
He's on the floor.
Where's your mom?
My mom is by the computer.
Is your mom breathing?
No.
Okay, and your dad is not breathing?
No.
Okay, all right.
Police race to the scene. First responding officers lead 40-year-old Eric Cola away from his deceased parents' home, while detectives head inside.
We could see that there was a male lying on the kitchen floor. There was a large pool of blood around his head.
The blood was coagulated, so it had been there a while. You know, it wasn't fresh blood.
He was holding his car keys in one hand. He had his coat on, so it was clear that he had just walked in the door. He hadn't even set everything on the counter yet. As I viewed the male victim, the wounds appeared to be a gunshot. It was near the temple of his head.
Around the corner is like a hallway entryway with a computer desk, and the female victim was there. She was shot in the head also.
Their hands are on the keyboard, and so you could see that she had been typing before she was shot. What she was typing didn't appear to be significant, but it made us believe that she had no idea that someone was behind her going to shoot her. It appeared that they ambushed them.
The victims are identified as 68-year-old Dennis Cola and his wife, 65-year-old Myrna. As investigators examine the scene, they make note of other telling details.
We didn't know if it was a single killer or more than one person, but you would expect more disturbance if there were more than one, or that they would have overpowered the victims, and that didn't seem to have happened.
With Myrna sitting at the computer comfortably, it led us to wonder if she was the first to be killed. And her husband, Dennis, came home, and he was the second one shot. There was the smell of decomposition. At that point, we weren't sure how many days earlier they were killed, but we needed to get information pretty quickly.
Detectives find no sign of forced entry and no indication of any kind of struggle.
The crime lab comes in. They collect fingerprints and DNA and a computer for analysis. We went upstairs and we noticed in the one bedroom there was a dresser that was disturbed, and it appeared that it had been ransacked. What was unusual about it was the person started at the top and worked their way down with the chest of drawers. But if you did it that way, you wouldn't be able to see what was in the drawer below it.
This looked like someone was trying to make it look like a burglary, but nothing seemed to be missing.
And there were many other valuables in the house, including Myrna's purse, and Dennis' wallet was still in his back pocket. It looked like this was staged, quite frankly.
While investigators continue searching for clues, they find what could be a key piece of evidence.
The bedroom had a .22 rifle in the closet. There's also a box of .22 shells on a shelf that had been moved and partially opened.
That was very possibly the gun that was used in the homicides.
So the gun is sent to the crime lab for an analysis.
As the crime scene investigation continues, news of the murders spreads quickly through the close-knit community.
When I heard about it, I thought, I can't believe this is happening. I was devastated. It hit me real hard. It was like, why would somebody kill them? And everybody loved them.
Born and raised in Wisconsin, Dennis and Myrna Cola had been happily married for 42 years.
Dennis and Myrna had a lot of friends. They had deep roots here.
They had children and grandchildren, and they were very popular.
I didn't hear of anyone that had anything bad to say about either one of them.
From humble beginnings, Dennis rose to become a successful businessman.
Dennis had graduated as a pharmacist, and he had owned a number of pharmacies and businesses throughout the years in different locations.
I worked with him for 2 years. As a boss, he was down to earth, fantastic guy. If you needed something, he was there. He treated me like a daughter.
Dennis was successful in life and in love.
Him and his wife, They were always happy, having a good time. Myrna had a lot of energy. She was very sociable.
Myrna was very well educated, and she was presently teaching part-time on a substitute basis.
They had a good marriage. They enjoyed life.
The couple had 2 children, their son Eric and 37-year-old daughter Cindy. Both were married with families of their own.
Their family seemed pretty tight. Dennis and Myrna, they were involved with their kids and involved with their grandkids.
These were parents who were very dedicated. They really wanted the best for their kids and loved spending time with family. Dennis and Myrna were getting ready to have a quiet retirement and relaxing and enjoying life.
Now, those dreams have been brutally snatched away.
Both shot. I would have never in my life expected something like this to happen.
It just seemed to make no sense. We're trying to understand who would do that and what would be the motive.
While police bring the Cola's son Eric into the station to get more information, investigators go door to door looking for witnesses.
We start canvassing to see if anyone saw anything, heard anything.
Nobody in the neighborhood had seen anything suspicious.
For them, it was just mostly shock. They couldn't believe that these 2 people had been killed.
As detectives continue to search for a lead, they get their first break.
One of the neighbors mentioned that he thought he knew the motive and why it happened, and also the murder.
He was very concerned. He believed that his life was in danger. He felt that he may be next.
This neighbor, Steve Burgess, was a banker, and he thought that he may have been the intended target of the homicide. His reasoning was he had got a threatening call multiple times from a person that threatened to kill him.
Coming up, new evidence emerges.
The day after the homicides, he cashed his $50,000 check and never told us.
And family secrets come to light.
There was some jealousy, maybe bad blood between the 2.
Dennis always complained that he was worthless and that he didn't want to work.
She had apparently lit into Dennis in a rage.
Until a disturbing clue reveals a twisted plan.
Someone had put this threatening note in his mailbox.
Now he believes that someone was out to get him.
And exposes a cold-blooded betrayal nobody saw coming.
I never thought he was the kind of person that would do something like that.
It was extremely unexpected.
It's just chilling.
Grandparents Myrna and Dennis Cola have been brutally executed in their own home. Now, one of their neighbors, banker Steve Burgess, tells investigators the killer could be coming after him.
He was very concerned, and he believed that someone was out to get him, and he didn't know who, but the homicides may have been intended for him and his family.
Detectives ask Steve why someone would want him dead.
So at that time, the market crashed. There was people with money issues.
A lot of people came to him at the bank for loans, but they had no collateral. So people were very angry that Steve would not give them loans. The last threat was a couple of days earlier. It was a threat of violence. It certainly had to be taken serious.
If Steve was the intended target, how did Dennis and Myrna end up gunned down instead?
What he explained was a Google Earth search in front of Burgess's house showed the wrong address, showed Dennis and Myrna's address instead of his, and he thought that the killer killed the wrong people.
He felt that somebody had come to his house to follow through on the threat, but they ended up at Dennis and Myrna's residence. It was a concern that this possibly could have been a mistake on behalf of the murderer, and the homicides were not intended for Dennis and Myrna.
Before investigators can pursue the lead, the autopsy results arrive.
The autopsy report determined that they were both shot with a .22 caliber rifle.
But it was inconclusive. There wasn't enough bullet fragment left to tell if it came from the gun that we found in the house No fingerprints were found. I mean, even from the victims, like the gun had been cleaned up.
The autopsy report also confirmed that they had been deceased for a few days before the 911 call. It was likely that they were killed on that Friday.
The time of death sheds new light on the threatening phone call made to neighbor Steve Burgess.
We saw that call had come in Sunday morning after the Kulas were murdered. So the timeline it didn't make any sense.
We were able to determine that the threats against Steve Burgess had nothing to do with the deaths of Dennis and Myrna.
With their first lead a bust, detectives turned their attention closer to home.
We knew Eric and his sister Cindy were very close to their parents.
Eric did day trading and stuff like that, work on stocks. He was doing well. Dennis and Eric were pretty close. Some people would say like bread and butter. They'd have get-togethers all the time.
Eric was the one that found the bodies. We needed a conversation with Eric for information that he might be able to provide us.
Hoping he can provide details about the crime, investigators interview Eric at the station.
Eric was still extremely emotional over the deaths of his parents, but he said he wanted to be as helpful as he possibly could and would do whatever he could to try to find who was responsible.
Detectives ask how he came to find his parents had been killed.
He said the school called and said that Myrna hadn't shown up for work. They called his parents and they didn't respond.
So Eric tried calling and was unable to get an answer, so he called his sister and asked if she had any contact with them, and she had not.
He became concerned and drove over to the house.
Once he walked in the house, he observed his father lying on the kitchen floor and started searching for his mom, and then also found her deceased.
Eric said he was extremely close to his parents. His dad, supported all of his endeavors. They were just the best of buddies.
We asked Eric what was the last time he had seen his parents, and he said a few days before the homicides.
He visited them like he did all the time. He said his dad was working on the deck, and his mom was doing laundry. There didn't seem to be anything unusual.
Investigators ask Eric where he was on the day of the murders.
He said that Friday was he and his wife's anniversary. He had worked till 2. Then he helped his buddy Mike do some work in a bathroom. They were renovating a bathroom. Eric had told us that he had gone to 2 stores after leaving his buddy's house, looking for a specific plant that his wife liked, a hanging plant.
Eric presents a receipt stamped at 6:15 p.m.
After he bought the plant, he went directly home, and they got ready to go out for the evening with friends to celebrate the anniversary. Eric said that he had tried over the weekend to contact his parents and wasn't able to do so. He was becoming concerned, but just thought that they were busy.
When asked who might have wanted to harm his parents, Eric says they were well-liked and had no enemies.
It seemed really strange, really unusual. No reason for the victims to be killed. Both victims killed.
Before concluding Eric's interview, detectives get results back from the crime lab.
The report came back indicating that the time of death, based on the computer analysis, was 5:41 on that Friday.
Myrna was using the computer, and the last keystroke was 5:41 p.m. So that gave us a timestamp. That's huge.
With the keystroke data, detectives verify Eric's alibi.
We spoke to his friend Mike, and Mike said yes, Eric was here until about 5:30 when he left, and he was going to go to the store. So he basically confirmed what Eric was telling us was correct. The receipt, combined with what his friend Mike said, it appeared that there wasn't enough time for Eric to commit the crime. Also, it just seemed very unlikely that someone who loved his mother and father very much could be involved in something like this.
Before Eric leaves the police station, he remembers crucial information that takes detectives by surprise.
Eric had told us that his sister Cindy and her husband Pat were being financially supported by Dennis and Myrna, and that their dad, Dennis, told Cindy they were getting cut off financially.
The Friday morning of the homicides, Cindy had called Dennis. Dennis let her know that there was not going to be any more money. She became very upset.
Had there been an argument over money leading Cindy to kill?
That's extremely unexpected, but she did have motive, so you start looking at Cindy as a suspect.
Police investigating the double homicide of Dennis and Myrna Cola believe their daughter Cindy may have been angry with her father after he cut off financial support. The two had a tense conversation just hours before the murders.
When we started talking to the circle of friends and family, we were told Dennis was more than generous. He gave tens of thousands to Cindy and her husband.
Cindy relied on her parents. They needed this money to pay their bills. When Dennis had told Cindy that he was cutting her off, she didn't know how those bills were going to get paid.
Detectives learn the Cola's children are set to inherit over $700,000 from their parents' death. While son Eric is known in the community as a successful businessman, Cindy's circumstances are different.
Cindy didn't have much money, if any, and she was constantly asking for money because they were not making ends meet.
She was working a minimum wage job or a little above that, and Pat, her husband, couldn't keep a job, would quit or get fired. They were living paycheck to paycheck and Dennis's handout to handout.
Me and Dennis would talk about Cindy at the pharmacy, and he kept telling me that he was sick and tired of supporting her every month, helping them out with their bills and stuff like that. And that Friday morning, he was very upset, and he said, "My daughter called me this morning, crying on the phone because I told my daughter that I'm cutting her and her husband off."
When she would get upset, she would get just extreme, over-the-top emotions. Cindy hearing that the cash cow was being butchered would be a reason for her to now go off the rails, and it went from bad to worse.
Cindy became a strong suspect.
Police bring Cindy into the station for questioning.
Cindy appeared broke up over the deaths of her parents, but she really laid out the family dynamic. Her parents had considered her the black sheep of the family. She said that she didn't believe her parents cared about her like they cared about Eric, and she was upset with how they treated her.
She told us, according to her parents, that Eric could do no wrong and that Cindy was a disappointment and continued to be a disappointment.
But Cindy denied that she had anything to do with her parents' death, even though there was this friction between them.
Investigators question Cindy about the argument with her father the morning of the murders.
Cindy downplayed the conversation she had with her father. She said just that she was disappointed her father had said he wouldn't give her any money. But it wasn't a negative conversation.
Detectives wonder if Cindy is more guilty than she's letting on.
There was a lot of tension between Cindy and her parents. There was disapproval there.
We looked at desperation. She was desperate for money with the inheritance, and given her bad feelings, all these things could lead to the fact that she may have been the one that took the lives of her parents.
With suspicion swirling, police ask Cindy where she was when her parents were killed.
On Friday, she was working and had left at 4:45. They have a time clock. She had punched out.
After work, she had stopped at the store just after 5:30. She purchased beer and ice, and then her and Patrick at a barbecue with the neighbors.
Police work to confirm Cindy's alibi.
She was working. That was verified then. Cindy had stopped at a Quick Trip, and the Quick Trips all have video, so she was on camera at a Quick Trip near her home at the time of the homicides, not anywhere near her parents.
While Cindy is ruled out as the shooter, her husband Patrick comes into focus.
Family and friends said that Patrick did not get along with Dennis and Myrna. and Patrick stood to inherit a substantial amount of money along with Cindy.
Dennis did not like her husband at all. He told me that Cindy's husband married Cindy for the money because he knew that Dennis and Myrna had money. Dennis always complained that his son-in-law, Patrick, was worthless and that he didn't want to work. He sits and plays with the video games, and he's too lazy to go find a job.
Investigators dig deeper into Patrick's relationship with his in-laws.
Talking to family and friends, we learned that Dennis and Myrna were upset when Patrick and Cindy got married. They asked Cindy not to marry him. They felt that he lacked motivation, and they remained unhappy with him. And I think the feeling was mutual.
According to some reports, when there was alcohol involved, he could have been a violent person.
Apparently, the Friday morning of the homicides, Cindy told Patrick that they were not going to be getting any more money. People were saying that Patrick was even more angry than Cindy, that they were being cut off financially. It was a large red flag.
Detectives also learned Patrick had the capability to pull off an execution-style hit.
Eric and other relatives were now pointing us toward Patrick, saying that he was a Marine and that he knew how to handle weapons.
It certainly moves Patrick up to the top of the list as far as suspects.
Police hunting the killer of Dennis and Myrna Cola believe their son-in-law, Patrick Cowell, has motive for murder.
Patrick was a great interest to us because he did not get along with Dennis and Myrna, and he stood to inherit a lot of money, so it certainly is motive. And Patrick was in the Marine Corps, so he would be an expert marksman.
When I heard that the police are starting to question him, I thought maybe after Dennis mentioned cutting them off, that might have triggered his son-in-law to kill them both.
At the police station, detectives confront Patrick about his relationship with his in-laws.
Patrick said that he was not popular in that family, that he was not comfortable with them. They weren't comfortable with him. There was kind of a cold relationship. He knew from Cindy that they were being cut off from Dennis and Myrna. He wasn't happy about it, but he denied having any involvement in the homicides.
Investigators press Patrick about where he was at the time of the murders.
He was without a job at the time, and basically he spent most of his day on the sofa with Xbox. We asked if he had any guns in the house, and he agreed that he did. We asked if he would turn those over to us, and he said he would.
As detectives wrap up their interview with Patrick, patrol officers are dispatched to collect the gun and gaming console, which are then sent on to the crime lab.
The gun had been analyzed and, in fact, was eliminated as the weapon used to kill Dennis and Myrna.
Also, we were able to prove through the crime lab that he was on the Xbox at the time he said he was. And so that eliminated him because he was home at the time that Dennis and Myrna were killed.
With Patrick ruled out, police are left scrambling for new suspects. The unsolved homicides leave the community on edge.
When a crime like this happens in a small town like Berry Mills, there's a lot of pressure on law enforcement to get it solved. People want answers. These aren't strangers to them. These are people they know.
People in that neighborhood were fearful. You know, the closer you are to something like that, the more concerned you are.
We were kind of scared for our lives because we didn't know why something like this would happen.
Looking for new leads, investigators dig into Dennis's business connections and the wealthy pharmacist's other ventures around town.
Dennis had a nephew, Nick Herring, who was promised a business from Dennis. They were going to open a car dealership together and actually did.
What we understood was that Nick was very familiar with running car dealerships and had done a good job.
Business was good, but then Dennis changed the deal.
As the dealership was up and running, Dennis brought Eric, his son, in to start running it with Nick, and there was some jealousy, maybe bad blood between the two.
Nick was like complaining all the time, so Dennis had to go help out with the business. Dennis said they could not get along together, and he ended up buying Nick out.
At that point, Nick was quite unhappy, and there was some falling out.
Tension mounted until Dennis sold the business, leaving Nick resentful.
Nick lost a pretty substantial amount of money, so he would certainly have reason to be upset.
Could Nick have harbored a deadly desire for revenge? Police bring him into the station for questioning.
We spoke to Nick Herring, and he admitted that the relationship had soured.
Nick had said that Dennis had given him too low amount for the business and that he got cheated out of some profit. Nick felt that he had been treated badly, basically kicked to the curb by his uncle.
Despite the bad blood, Nick insists he's not involved in the murders.
Nick said that it was in the past that he had started his own car dealership. He was successful, and that although it was upsetting, he wouldn't hold a grudge, and he had no reason to kill Dennis and Myrna.
Nick said that he had worked until about 5:30. Then he had picked up his girlfriend, and they'd gone out to the tavern. We were able to confirm that he was at work all day, and then the bartender where they were at could confirm that he and his girlfriend had spent the evening. And so we were able to eliminate him.
Having ruled out yet another suspect, the investigation into the Cola murders hits a roadblock.
It was very disturbing because it just seemed to make no sense. Here's a couple that are a retirement age, had long, successful careers. For someone to come in and just murder them, it's senseless. We were still trying to understand who would do that and what would be the motive.
1 week after the murders, police receive news that jolts the investigation back to life.
We get a call that a patrol car is being sent out to Eric Kula's residence for a suspicious item in the mailbox. Eric said that he had got a threatening letter. He was now extremely concerned that he was going to get killed.
One week after Dennis and Myrna Cola are ruthlessly gunned down in their own home, police learn their 40-year-old son Eric has received a threatening note. Could he be the next target?
Someone had put this note in his mailbox. He was really, really concerned. This note said, "Fixed you." The message is kind of unusual, but Eric thought they'd killed his parents and were now going to come after him.
He had no idea who would have left it or where it came from.
There was an envelope, but it wasn't mailed.
The handwriting looked like it was done by someone very young. It was so strange. It was probably written that way so a handwriting analysis couldn't be done.
When it comes to Eric's safety, detectives don't take any chances.
We have to try to figure out what was going on.
We had an investigator and a camera to watch his property. We start canvassing Eric's neighborhood to see if anyone saw anything.
But with no witnesses, police are still left with no idea who placed the note.
This is perplexing. We're trying to determine, was this somebody local or was this someone from out of the area? We were very concerned.
With this new potential threat, investigators cast a wider net to find the Cola's killer. But when they scour Dennis and Myrna's computers, phones, and finances, they're surprised at what they find.
We subpoenaed Dennis and Myrna's bank records and noticed that there's a check written and cashed on Dennis and Myrna's account for $50,000. It's cashed on the day after the murder, and it's made out to Eric Kula and was deposited into Eric's bank account. It seemed really strange. So you just found your parents dead, and the next day you go cash a check for $50K It had to be looked at.
Detectives reach out to Eric, hoping to learn more details.
Eric's explanation is his dad gave it to him on the day that he had stopped over at his parents' house.
That's very interesting because of all the conversations we had with Eric, he never mentioned this, and suddenly we have a check for $50,000, and if everything was okay, why wouldn't he tell us about it?
To have a check that was deposited the day after the murders by a family member, that set off alarms for investigators.
After we find that check, we look for other checks.
We used a forensic accountant to review Eric's finances because it was quite complicated with the day trading that he was involved in. When the accountant went through it with us and explained what we were looking at, I think we almost fell off our chairs because we had no idea that this was what was going on. He told everybody that he was extremely successful with his day trading, but Eric was broke.
He was day trading, but it was a myth as far as making profit. The person looking at his financials basically called BS. She told us this guy's worth nothing. He's worth about $2,000 total. He was blowing smoke.
Then, police uncover more startling information about Eric's financial circumstances.
We learned that Eric was also going to his parents and receiving large amounts of money. Through the years, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars. He led everybody to believe that he was doing so well, including his wife. Eric told her that he was making a lot of money. There was nothing to worry about, that he was just doing great.
Despite everyone's impression that Eric was this successful day trader, his parents had been funding his and his family's lifestyle.
If he was going to have to admit that to family, friends, it was going to be devastating.
Detectives learn when Dennis and Myrna stopped financially supporting their daughter, Cindy, they also cut off Eric.
We knew just shortly before Dennis and Myrna were killed, Eric found out that he was no longer getting money from his parents.
The damning evidence continues to pile up against Eric.
Dennis told me he was giving money to Eric, but basically he was done giving to both kids. He says, I need to tell them I'm done supporting them. It's about time I put my foot down and cut them off.
As investigators start to discover that Eric is not what he seems, shocking results come back from the lab.
The state crime lab did a handwriting analysis on that check for $50,000. It wasn't Dennis's signature on that check. We found out that it was Eric's handwriting, that he had forged his father's name on that check.
Everything he's told us is a lie. So things are starting to really roll toward Eric.
Police obtain a warrant to search Eric's home, hoping to find additional incriminating evidence.
We're in the basement. Among other things, was a box of envelopes in a desk drawer. The fixed U note had a security envelope, and every one of them has a different pattern for their security pattern. Lo and behold, those envelopes have the same pattern. We were able to determine that envelope in Eric's mailbox with the fixed U note came from the box of envelopes in his home. From his fire pit in his backyard, we found things that would be associated with making a fixed U note. A spring from a spiral notebook. The letter was written on spiral notebook paper. A barrel of a pen used to write the address. Those types of things are in the fire. So that fixed U note came from his house. It didn't look good for Eric.
In the search, detectives also discover a .22 caliber rifle, similar to what police believe was the murder weapon. The gun is sent to the ballistics lab for testing.
With the lies and forgery, we were pretty confident that Eric was our guy.
But at that point, Eric had an alibi for the entire time that the homicides were occurring. So we're trying to figure out how he shot Dennis and Myrna.
Detectives investigating the double homicide of Dennis and Myrna Cola suspect the couple's own son, 40-year-old Eric, is the killer. But they need hard evidence to lay charges.
We went out and started re-interviewing witnesses and reviewing all the evidence that we had.
As detectives try to learn more details about Eric's connection to the crime, the ballistics results come back. Police wonder if the rifle found in Eric's home will prove to be the murder weapon.
Dennis and Myrna were shot with a .22 caliber rifle, but Eric's gun wasn't the gun that was involved in the crime.
Undeterred, detectives recheck Eric's alibi for when his parents were being murdered.
The time of death, based on the computer analysis, was 5:41 on that Friday.
Prior to the homicide, Eric said that he'd helped his buddy Mike renovating a bathroom.
When we originally talked to Mike, he said that Eric had left his house about 5:30, but when we re-interviewed him, he said it's very possible it could have been earlier. Once Mike's story changed, we really thought that we were heading in the right direction.
Investigators take a closer look at Eric's timeline.
Eric had told us that he had gone to 2 stores after leaving his buddy's house to get a specific plant for his wife. At the time of the homicide, he had stopped at the first store, and that store didn't have it, so he had to go to the other store, got the plant, and produced a receipt.
Eric's receipt is stamped 6:15 p.m. The second store is located only 10 minutes from the Cola's residence. But where was Eric at 5:41 when his parents were being shot?
We checked with the garden center, the first one he went to, and they had plenty of those plants on the day and time that Eric said that they didn't have any. We also reviewed video footage, and he's not there, nor is his vehicle seen coming or leaving the parking lot. So there was a window of opportunity for Eric to commit the murders. He had no alibi for the time that the computer showed that Myrna was shot.
With Eric's alibi torn apart, detectives bring him in for another interview. They begin by confronting Eric about forging the $50,000 check.
Eric explained that he had permission from his dad to write checks out to himself, and that his dad had actually given him the check, but just was too busy, so told him to sign it himself. He told us, "I write them all the time," and that was commonplace for him to do that. It's a lie, an approvable one. He's never written one. He couldn't produce a single check that he had ever written. He was confronted with the fixed U note and about the envelopes, and that they did come from his house. With what we found and what we knew about his financials, all of those things together are great evidence.
We just went down item after item after item after item, and Eric acted, in my opinion, desperate, and he wanted to leave.
But Eric was no longer free to go. On July 29th, 2010, police charge Eric with the murder of his parents, Dennis and Myrna Cola.
What we believe started this whole crime in motion was the fact that Eric was being cut off financially. He was desperate.
Detectives piece together how the double homicide unfolded.
We believe he went to see his mom at their home, and Myrna was sitting at the computer, and then Eric walked upstairs, got the gun that was located in the closet, came down and shot his mother, and then waited for his father to arrive. When Dennis came home, he was shot almost immediately, within seconds after he walked through that door.
After the murders, Eric wipes the gun clean and returns it to the closet.
Eric then took a check and said to himself, $50,000 will get me through until the will is settled.
After he shot his parents, he went to a garden center, bought the plant for his alibi, and went home to celebrate their anniversary dinner that night.
He's as cold-blooded as a murder-for-hire man. His parents did nothing but love him and take care of him his whole life. He's a narcissistic little son of a bitch and thought that his dad owed him a living.
Eric Cola's arrest stuns the community.
Everyone thought that he was this golden child, that he had a great relationship with his parents, that he was this successful day trader. That he could have done this, people were shocked.
I would have never expected Eric to do this. The way Dennis talked about him, always bragged about his son, and I never thought he was the kind of person that would do something like that.
In June 2012, 2 years after Dennis and Myrna Cola were killed, a jury finds their son Eric guilty of intentional murder.
His sister, Cindy, during the sentencing hearing, was sobbing, and she begged the judge in that courtroom to make sure justice was done that day.
Eric Cola is sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms, plus 6 years for forgery.
Many times I've thought about how somebody could do that, and I just simply can't fathom it. I guess we all lose a bit of our innocence when this kind of thing happens.
Myrna and Dennis are still dearly missed by their family and friends.
They were such a beautiful couple. They would give you your shirt off their back. I think of them very, very often. And my memory of Dennis is always a smiley face. I do miss him a lot. Sometimes I still think, boy, why did it have to be you? He'd still be living right now, happy life, finally retired, and enjoying his grandkids. And Myrna would probably still be dragging him on vacation.
A beloved mother of 4 and high school teacher.
All of her students loved her, every single one of them.
Was a very special person. I always wanted to be more like her.
Is found murdered, her body dumped miles from home.
As I got closer, you could see the outline of the body.
I've seen quite a few homicides, and this one was very brutal. It felt very personal.
Investigators try to piece together a mysterious crime.
Law enforcement believed there was a violent struggle within the bedroom.
He said that he did not hear this vicious attack that was taking place within feet of where he was sleeping.
How could you not hear what was going on?
Until the case takes a jaw-dropping turn.
He was crying. He was emotional and said that he had a gun to his head.
And leads to a killer no one suspected.
I can't even fathom what goes through someone's mind when they do something like this.
It was disturbing, very disturbing.
Olney, Texas, a tiny rural town with a proud history in aviation.
Olney, Texas was the home of Air Tractor, crop dusting aircraft. They built them there.
It's a very small town, very close-knit. Pretty much everybody knows everyone.
It's an open-door community. Doors are unlocked. People are very welcoming.
On a warm summer morning in 2019, a terrible discovery shakes residents to their core.
The Young County Sheriff's Office received a call of a missing person, and the Olney Police Department was dispatched to the call.
Just before 10 a.m., officers arrived to find homeowner Peter Allen and his 2 children, Kiara and Darian. Peter tells police he's worried something terrible has happened to his wife, 49-year-old high school teacher, Manu Allen.
Peter told me that his wife was missing and that he had found a large amount of blood in their bedroom. And Peter told me that his wife's vehicle was gone.
Investigators head to the bedroom and are shocked at what they find.
As I got to the hallway, we started seeing signs of blood on the walls, most notably what looked like a handprint. And as we started going into the bedroom, we noticed there was a large pool of blood at the end of the bed and the knife on the floor. One of the things that we also noted in the bedroom is that there were no sheets on the bed. which seemed odd. There was blood splattered across the furniture, the mattress, the closet doors, and as we proceeded into the garage, you could clearly see drag marks. As we were in the kitchen, we did see what appeared to be a footprint. A picture started to develop that something very bad had happened.
As forensics begin processing the scene, police notify the DA's office.
My assistant district attorney, Philip Gregory, and I went out to the crime scene.
The carpets were pretty much soaked in blood. There was a lot of cast-off blood on the walls and on the doors, and it was a horrific scene to see. With that amount of blood, we were concerned that you're probably dealing with somebody who is deceased if they had not already made it to a hospital.
With no sign of the missing woman, investigators asked the family for more information about Manu Allen.
My mom was from a little village in southern Germany. She had 8 siblings. In the middle of my mom's college career, she came over to America to learn the language better. And my dad had seen her walk by, and my dad was like, "Ooh, who's that?" And while she was in America that summer, they spent like every day together.
Manu married U.S. Army veteran Peter Allen in 1996, and soon after, the couple moved to Crowell, Texas.
I came to know Peter and Manu when I was appointed police chief in Crowell, Texas, and Peter and I became good friends, and there was never no doubt that Peter and Manu loved each other very much.
Manu and Peter eventually settled in the small town of Olney with their 4 children.
My mom was a very supportive woman, but she was always pushing us to do our best.
Manu was one of the most respected teachers at Olney High School, teaching English and German.
All of her students loved her, every single one of them. And my mom, she'd always be one to joke with the kids. Even my friends, she would help them if they needed help with their homework after school.
Now, the loving wife and mother has gone missing. Police asked Peter Allen the last time he saw Manu.
The night before, he and his wife sat down on the couch, watched TV, and then he went to sleep on the couch, and she retired to the bedroom to go to sleep.
Peter claims that no one noticed any sign of trouble until the morning.
According to Mr. Allen, his daughter, Kiara, had woke up. I believe that she needed to get some laundry done when the laundry room is through the parents' room. She noticed that there was some blood in the hallway area, and concerned about her mother, she went and woke up Mr. Allen on the couch. At that point, according to Mr. Allen went with her to investigate. He said that when he saw the knife, he drew the conclusion that she may have just been injured and cut. But clearly seeing the scene, a cut would not have produced the amount of blood, and it was very apparent that somebody was either severely injured or deceased.
Peter tells officers that he and Kiara went to the local hospital to look for Manu.
It did seem that it was out of place, the way that Peter went to the hospital first before calling law enforcement. There seemed to be a lack of emotion. He was very calm. So I pulled Officer Clark aside and I advised him, I said, we need to be very careful how we talk and handle Mr. Allen because he's potentially involved.
Law enforcement believed there was a violent struggle within the bedroom. Mr. Allen was arguably within feet of the actual act occurring. There were 2 children that were inside the house too. And investigators were concerned that, hey, how could you not hear what was going on?
Peter and his 2 children are brought to the police station for further questioning. Meanwhile, officers are dispatched to nearby parks and wooded areas to look for Manu's car, a white SUV.
In the morning, a neighboring county deputy, Wilk, from Archer County arrived, and he knows the Allens.
My oldest son, Wyatt, she was his teacher, and he thought the world of her. When I came through town on Main Street, I saw crime scene tape up around the Allens' house. And in Olney, you don't see crime scene tape up around houses that often.
As a typical law enforcement officer. He says, hey, what can I do to help?
I was asked to go out to Lake Cooper, look for a white SUV. I was given the license plate number, and when I pull into Lake Cooper and I go around to where the boat ramp is, I could see a white SUV on the other side of the lake where the dam is. So I got out, started looking at the vehicle, and activate my body-worn camera, take photos of the car, and I had noticed some brown smears on the car. And I thought, this looks like dried blood. So after I had photographed the car and the area around the car, I started looking around. So I took off walking towards the fence line. I looked to my left, and I could see a pile of clothes or blankets. And as I got closer, you could see the kind of the outline of the body wrapped up in these sheets and blankets. I felt the body. It was cold to the touch. Rigor had set in. I had my body camera going. And I think on my video camera, you can hear me take a deep sigh because I know that the Allens are going to get notified that their mother has been killed.
We received a phone call from Mr. Wilk
I got a dead body out here at Lake Cooper.
That he had located the vehicle and a body.
Well, we have a whole crime scene back there at the house.
When we first arrived at the lake, you could see a outline of a white sheet over by the fence line.
Police confirm the deceased woman is Manu Allen.
Miss Allen had been stabbed multiple times, and a lot of stab wounds were to the head. I've seen quite a few homicides, and this one was very brutal due to the amount of violence that was involved and the care taken in the way that she was moved and placed at the lake. It felt very personal. That started leading us to believe that it was somebody that knew her.
Coming up, suspicion falls close to home.
She had picked up the knife that was in the bedroom.
He said he heard something in the middle of the night,
causing rumors to swirl through a small town.
Everybody knows everybody. A lot of accusations started going around.
I said, I need you to look me in the face and tell me, did you have anything to do with this?
And investigators uncover new clues.
It was a communist block pistol, and it was semi-automatic.
Until a stunning admission leaves a family devastated.
It was just a shock that he confessed.
It was a nightmare.
The body of missing teacher and mother of four, Manu Allen, has just been located at Lake Cooper, a recreational area a few miles from her home in Olney, Texas.
I'd been to homicide scenes before, but when you find somebody that you knew and your kids knew, when I did go home and told my kids that, hey, I was your teacher that was killed, that was hard.
Olney, Texas is that small community where you don't expect this sort of violence at all. There had not been a murder there in the last 10 years.
As they continue their investigation, detectives examine several items of evidence, trying to piece together what happened.
The vehicle had turned down a little offshoot and was approximately 20 feet from the road, and whoever was driving the vehicle had tried to turn the vehicle around and got high-centered.
Police believe that after the SUV got stuck, Manu's body was removed from the car.
The body was found within sight of the vehicle, and there had been yucca leaves placed around the facial area. If you have a body where the eyes or the face are covered, it typically means that the person who has been involved in the death somehow knew this individual.
When a killer does this type of behavior, it's because they're trying to show some sense of respect to the deceased.
Forensics process the body and collect fingerprint evidence from Manu's vehicle.
There were fingerprints that were located on the car that were in blood. When you find these, it's you can say the golden ticket for law enforcement because whoever was involved in this left their signature behind.
Another detail in the field grabs detectives' attention.
There was a bicycle track that was leaving from the area of the vehicle onto the main road.
Is it possible the killer had perhaps left on a bicycle?
It being a recreational area, there is the potential that it could have been just a person riding through the area, but you're going to collect as much information as you can.
Investigators catch a break when they find a witness who supports their discovery.
There was an oil field worker that worked on the road that comes right out from the lake heading into Olney. And he happened to see very early in the morning someone on a bicycle wearing dark clothes with a backpack heading towards Olney from the lake area.
While officers are dispatched to track down the cyclist, detectives inform Peter that his wife's body has been found and closely watch his response.
Mr. Allen, his emotional reaction was a little different than what you would expect.
Mr. Allen was extremely detached, emotionless. He said that, he wanted to get justice for Manuela and that he had multiple firearms and a lot of ammunition that he could bring to bear if he did figure out who had done this, and that he was going to do what the military had taught him to do. As a law enforcement officer, I get mixed messages from that. When you start saying that you're going to go after whoever did it, you have to wonder if he's trying to point the investigation in a different direction than on him.
Based on the crime scene, detectives believe that Manu was killed in her bedroom and removed from the home in the early morning hours. They want to know how this could have happened with Peter in the next room.
Mr. Allen said that he had been drinking vodka, and then typically if Mr. Allen had been drinking, he would not sleep in the same bed as Miss Allen.
Mr. Allen said that it was common for him to sleep on the couch because he snored a lot.
Peter claims the only time he woke up was around dawn when he thought he heard his wife's car starting.
He heard it and he didn't think anything of it. Mr. Allen indicated that it's not his job to check on where she's going.
And he apparently went back to sleep.
Police want to know how he heard a car start, but not his wife being attacked just feet away.
Obviously, there was a violent struggle within the bedroom, and Mr. Allen was within shouting distance, hearing distance of the struggle.
Mr. Allen had talked about how the incident may have occurred and that struggles can be silent, and that might be a reason why he didn't hear what had happened.
That's another cause for concern for law enforcement when you've got a suspect with a potential explanation for every possible fact.
Wondering how the killer escaped in Manu's car, investigators ask where she kept her car keys.
Mr. Allen, he indicated that those keys were not kept in the bedroom. They were kept in kind of a common area in the kitchen.
When asked why anyone would want to kill his wife, Peter has a theory.
During the interview with Mr. Allen, he had indicated that it was well known that he had a large gun collection, and he had spoken to a lot of people about it.
Mr. Allen was concerned that someone was breaking into the home to steal his gun collection.
Police are skeptical as they found no signs of forced entry and were not aware of any stolen items.
As a law enforcement officer, I felt that Mr. Allen might be trying to steer the investigation. He had been drinking vodka that day. He was feet away from where the murder had occurred. He was very concerned about things that, in my mind, would not be of importance from somebody that had just lost their wife. So that made him rise to the top as a potential suspect.
Detectives believe that before Manu Allen's body was dumped at a nearby lake, she was stabbed to death in her bedroom while 3 family members were in the house. But her husband Peter insists he detected no sign of trouble.
Peter Allen, Manu's husband, said that he did not hear this vicious attack that was taking place within feet of where he was sleeping on the couch.
Skeptical of Peter's version of events, police want to speak with his children, Darian and Kiara, to see if they witnessed or heard anything. They start with his 15-year-old daughter, Kiara.
She said she was out with her boyfriend and that her father let her in the door around 11:30 that evening.
Her bedroom is where she went, which was right next door to her mother's room. She had put earbuds in her ears and had a phone call with a friend of hers and fell asleep with those in her ears.
Kira said that she never heard any screams or anything that alerted her that something bad was going on in the home.
Kira said she woke up that morning and she was trying to get to some clothing that she had washed, and the layout of the house would have required her to go through the master bedroom into the utility room, but the door was locked. And she said, Dad, the door's locked and I'm seeing blood over here. And that woke him up rather quickly. She said he asked her to go around to the other door in the garage and try to get in, but then when she did, she was met with just, the scene of the blood in the bedroom and everything else.
Kiara did walk through the bedroom and she did touch some items of evidence.
She had picked up the knife that was in the bedroom to examine it. She said that she did not see any blood or anything on it. Of course, picking up any kind of evidence is concerning. It leaves her information on the knife.
Investigators next interview Peter and Manu's 20-year-old son, Darian.
He said that he arrived back at the house at about 11:45 and then just went up to his bedroom. He said, I was playing a video game pretty much the whole night through. So I had my headphones on.
Darian said he had not heard anything other than he heard something in the middle of the night, but he just thought it was his father in the kitchen getting something.
According to Darian, he didn't find that unusual, so turned his attention back to his game.
There were 3 family members that were in the house. It was difficult for me personally to believe that they could not know that something serious is going on in a bedroom that's within 20 feet from you. I can't explain that.
When you have all these people in the home when this occurred, you have to rule them out individually.
Fingerprints and footprints can either rule people out or you can rule somebody in. And unfortunately, it's not like watching a crime TV show where the case is figured out in 15 minutes. It might take months to get returns on some of these items.
Peter and Manu's other children, 21-year-old William and 18-year-old Melanie, arrive at the police station anxious for news about their mother.
They wouldn't let us see my dad. Probably after like 5 hours of waiting, they finally let my dad in, and then my dad told us that they found her body. It was a nightmare.
At the time of the murder, Melanie Allen, the older daughter, was actually at Six Flags that evening, and they never returned home that night. William Allen, the oldest son, was a student at Tarleton State University, and he was in Stephenville the whole time.
Both William and Melanie insist they have no idea who would want their mother dead.
I didn't think anyone would have a single thought about hurting my mom.
You have to talk to the children, naturally, to see if they can give you any idea of other red flags or things that might have been going on in the home.
Investigators were concerned about simmering, unresolved conflict that may have led to a murder. But when the children were interviewed, none of them ever described seeing Mr. and Ms. Allen having any kind of a noteworthy fight.
Police tell the Allen family that they're free to go, but they can't return home until forensics finish processing the house.
The next day, there was a lot of evidence that was collected. The investigators took fingerprints, footprints, in addition to the handprints that were on the wall leading back towards the bedroom.
Detectives zero in on an interesting detail.
It appeared that the perpetrator had left the bedroom and had gone into the kitchen to specifically retrieve something because there were not that many footprints in that kitchen. And the footprints went straight to where the keys to the vehicle were kept.
So whoever had done this knew where they kept the keys.
48 hours into the investigation, the autopsy report provides chilling new insights into Manu's last moments.
The autopsy revealed that Manu Allen had sustained roughly 47 stab wounds, the majority of which were to her head. She did have some defensive wounds on her hands.
However, it wasn't the stab wounds that proved fatal.
She also had suffered strangulation, and a great deal of force had been used, so much so that portions of the neck had been broken.
The autopsy report contains one final insight into the killer's brutality.
They did find a post-mortem gunshot wound in her facial area.
If you look at the totality of what happened with Miss Allen, the stabbings, the choking, and then finally the bullet, we knew we needed to get this suspect caught as soon as possible.
Two days after Manu Allen's murder, detectives have learned that in addition to being viciously stabbed and strangled, she was also shot once in the face.
There was a post-mortem gunshot fired at the lake after the body was moved to where her final resting spot was.
There was a bullet casing that was recovered from that particular area, and the actual bullet.
Police bring this new evidence to the crime lab, hoping to identify the gun used to shoot Manu. As people in the town of Olney await news of an arrest, rumors start to fly in the close-knit community.
There's a group on Facebook called Rants and Raves, and you will hear whatever is on somebody's mind about anything that's going on in town. And a lot of people were very hard on the Allen family.
It was really tough waiting for answers because other people in the town all wanted to point fingers at my dad. People looked at him differently. They would look at all of us differently.
Everybody knows everybody. A lot of accusations started going around. A lot of discussion about Mr. Allen's past, his prior military. A lot of people felt that Mr. Allen was potentially involved in the homicide of his wife.
His children stand by him, but some of Peter's friends doubt his innocence.
When I'd heard that Manu had been killed, I'm instantly thinking car wreck or something. So I called Peter's phone. And we hadn't spoken in quite a few years. Melanie answered. And I said, Melanie, what's going on over there? She said, well, Mom's been murdered. So I told her, I said, I'm on the way. I had some concerns about Peter and his military background. Peter, from time to time, drank hard liquor. I'd never seen him violent, but my thought was maybe something had snapped. Maybe there had been infidelity in the family or something. When I got there, I said, Peter, I need to know now. I need you to look me in the face and tell me, did you have anything to do with this? He looked me square in the face, nose to nose, and says, I had nothing to do with this, bro. You know I couldn't do it. And it led me to think, who could have done this? It was disturbing.
Detectives get a fresh lead when they receive new information on the cyclist seen leaving the area where Manu's body was dumped.
The day that the body was found, an oil field worker, around 6 o'clock in the morning, he saw a person headed from Lake Cooper riding back towards Olney on a bicycle. The local bank had security cameras on the outside of it, and a surveillance video showed somebody riding in town on a bicycle, dressed up in shorts with a backpack. The video footage that was received from the bank, it was from a distance, so you were not able to see the face for identification purposes. You could see it was a younger person. It was definitely the person that everybody was wanting to talk to, but we did not know who that person was.
The quest to identify the suspicious cyclist hits a dead end, and pressure continues to mount on the police.
The community's in a lot of pain. We were kind of in a situation where we can say, hey, we're investigating this, we have leads, we're working on them. Please be patient with us.
As police await analysis of the bullet and casing found at Lake Cooper, they call Peter back to the PD and ask him about his gun collection.
Peter Allen had told us that he had weapons and ammunition in the house and that they were stored in his bedroom in a closet.
Peter tells investigators not all of his guns are locked in the safe. He also keeps a loaded pistol in a dresser drawer.
It was a communist block pistol that would have been from like the Soviet Union, and it was semi-automatic.
Police never found this gun when they searched the house. Had the killer stolen it? Or had Peter staged it to look this way?
It felt as if Mr. Allen was trying to lead the investigation. But investigators are naturally going to start looking at other firearm thefts or burglary cases that have occurred in the area.
Investigators look into recent gun thefts around town.
Corey Taylor was a local kid there that had been in trouble, and it was learned that just before the murders had occurred, he had been involved in a burglary that involved firearm theft.
Had Corey entered the house to steal Peter's guns and killed Manu in the process?
Mr. Allen had maybe over 100 firearms in the house, so that became a potential motive for the killing.
So we go to Corey Taylor's house. When I got to his apartment, Corey came to the door and told him that I was there so that he could be interviewed about the murder of Miss Allen. Corey indicated that he did know Miss Allen from school.
Officers asked Corey for his whereabouts the night of the murder.
His alibi was totally void of having any contact with the Allen family residence whatsoever.
As Corey speaks, officers see something suspicious.
I noticed a bicycle, and the tire mark from the bicycle looked very, very similar to the tracks at the lake.
It had the exact tread that was seen out at the lake close to Manu's body and the vehicle.
So a red flag went up there.
Detectives working the homicide of Manu Allen have noticed a suspicious bike in the apartment of 17-year-old Corey Taylor. Could Corey be the cyclist from the surveillance video?
One of our investigators was able to see a bicycle, and he's actually able to take a photograph of the treads on it, and everybody was kind of like, oh, that's probably the bicycle we're looking for. Mr. Taylor denied that it was his, but he indicated that the bicycle was actually owned by a guy named Julius Mullins.
Corey Taylor said that his friend Julius Mullins had dated Manu's daughter, Melanie.
Detectives are curious if Corey is trying to deflect blame. They press Corey for more information about his friend, Julius Mullins.
Julius was a running back for the Alney football team, and so as far as the community, he was known.
Julius Mullins was well-liked by the other team members. He seemed to have some success on the field, but Julius Mullins did not always have the best home life.
Julius didn't have a stable home. I know his relationship with his parents were strained.
He had stayed with Corey Taylor some, as well as the high school gym, because the coaches had allowed him to stay there because he did not always have a place to stay.
Police learned that Julius knew Manu from school and had dated her daughter, Melanie, for a year.
He was a good person. My mom was extremely kind and accepting of Julius. She would help him with his homework. One time, he got kicked out of his house, and she let him even stay the night.
Despite Manu's love and support, Julius's behavior had changed in recent months.
Things just started going downhill. He just started doing worse and worse in school. He started getting in more fights with his parents. Him and I started getting in more fights. And I finally left him probably 6-7 months before what happened.
Police bring Julius in for an interview and notice some alarming details.
Julius Mullins, he had some cuts and scrapes on his arms and legs, which would be consistent with someone who had been out by Lake Cooper. There were a great deal of yucca and cactus plants, and you couldn't have gone through that field without getting scratched up by the shrubbery.
Mullins had indicated that the night of the murder that he had went to a party with several other people. After the party, he said he went to Corey's apartment and crashed for the evening, but he had not seen Corey that night. So the alibi was pretty weak.
Julius Mullins admitted that he owned the bike that was at Corey Taylor's home. The bike places Julius Mullins out at Lake Cooper where the body had been left because those tire tracks matched that bike perfectly.
So with any murder investigation, the interviewers in these cases are going to press pretty hard to get to the information.
Detectives asked Julius for more details about his alibi and the injuries on his arms and legs.
As they're finding inconsistencies in the stories, they're going to start breaking these stories down and get him to eventually just tell the truth. He was crying, he was emotional, and Mullins finally admitted that he had killed Miss Allen. At that point, Mullins started giving the information that was pertinent and matched what we had found at the scene.
Julius tells police he had gained entry to the Allen home through a faulty garage window.
Mullins accessed the garage and went into the bedroom of Miss Allen. I believe Miss Allen was surprised when Mullins started the assault. He continued to assault her and she fought for her life. Mullins stabbed her multiple times and then eventually choked her to death. He then took the sheets off the bed, wrapped her up so that he could move her.
Police believe Julius then found Peter's Soviet-made pistol in the dresser drawer and headed to the kitchen to grab Manu's car keys.
He then drug her through the laundry room, through the garage, through the backyard, out to the alley, and loaded Miss Allen into the car. He loaded his bicycle into the car with him, and he drove her to the lake.
Julius planned to hide the body far from the road, but the vehicle got stuck on the rough terrain.
So he put together a hasty plan and pulled her out and drug her to a fence. He then took the gun and fired one shot, hitting her in the face to ensure that she was dead. And then he took his bike and he fled the scene. It was a sigh of relief in some respects that he confessed. Mullins did indicate that he was still in love with Melanie and was upset about that. We asked him why he would want to kill the woman he loves' mother. And Mullins said that he had a gun to his head. According to Mullins, on the evening before the murders had occurred, he said that he had gone to Allsup's and had run into Peter Allen in the store, and Peter had him come outside into Peter's car, and Peter had pulled a gun on him and pressed it to his chest and told him to kill Miss Allen, and that if he did not do it, that his whole family would be killed. He said that was the reason for committing the murder.
Julius Mullins has confessed to the murder of Manu Allen, but claims that he was forced into it by her husband, Peter.
Mr. Mullins gave very specific information about them meeting at an Allsup's convenience store, where Mullins said Mr. Allen pretty much just pulled him into his car and said, "Hey, you're going to do this. Otherwise, I'm going to go kill all your family."
When Mullins made these accusations toward Mr. Allen was still a person of interest.
Police try to verify the alleged meeting between Julius and Peter.
We were able to secure the phone records of Julius Mullins back to the day that Mr. Allen supposedly threatened Julius into murdering his wife, and were able to determine that Mr. Mullins' phone was nowhere near that Allsup's location at any time that day.
Police interviewed Julius again to clarify his allegations against Peter. He insists he's telling the truth and provides more shocking details about the murder.
He said that after Miss Allen was dead, that Peter assisted him in wrapping the body and pulling her out to the alleyway and then loaded her into the car.
Detectives receive forensic results and check if Julius's account matches the evidence.
There were some bloody handprints and some fingerprints, and they had footprints that they had sent to the crime lab, and they were eventually identified.
Forensic testing determined 2 people had left footprints in the kitchen. One set was left by Julius.
Julius had been in the home frequently when he was dating Melanie, and the footprints went straight to where the keys to the vehicle were kept in the kitchen, and Julius would know that.
Investigators wonder if the other prints belong to Peter, but the results show otherwise.
Kiara left footprints, but she said that she had stepped in the blood, so that lined up with what she had said had occurred.
The crime lab also determines fingerprints left in Manu's blood in the house and on her car belonged to one person.
Sure enough, they belong to Julius Mullins. We were able to rule Peter Allen out.
The things that Mullins attempted to implicate Peter in, the physical evidence did not support that. The cell phone data did not support that.
The results were confirmation that Mr. Allen had nothing to do with this.
Avery Mark. Manu was my life. She was my soulmate. And I don't think any human being alive could expect for the heart, the soul, the core of the family to be murdered without reason whatsoever. I knew they were going to look at me because I was the husband and I was in the house. When the police made the arrest, there was disbelief. I just didn't think he had it in him to do something like that.
On July 15th, 2019, 18-year-old Julius Mullins is charged with the murder of Manu Allen.
My daughter Melanie dated him, and Julius would come over. My wife was very kind to Julius. We were both nice to him. I was not worried about Julius at all while they were dating. He seemed more like a pleasant young man.
With Julius in custody, police find Peter's stolen pistol at the home of Corey Taylor.
They did investigate Corey Taylor, but he was ruled out. No fingerprints, no footprints, no DNA, nothing. The sole perpetrator of the crime was Julius Mullins.
Police believe the knife found at the scene may have been dropped by Julius, but forensic analysis found it was not used in the murder.
Staff at the school had found Mullins' backpack with a knife that was eventually determined to have been involved in the murder of Miss Allen.
Tragically, no one in the house heard Julius's vicious attack on Manu.
Kiara put earbuds in her ears and fell asleep with those in her ears. Darian was upstairs playing video games with a headset on, and then Mr. Allen had consumed alcohol, and that might have contributed to him sleeping heavier than normal.
Julius Mullins was charged ultimately and pled to murder in the first degree. And he also pled to the abuse of a corpse.
Julius receives a 55-year prison sentence.
I can't even fathom what goes through someone's mind when they do something like this, especially to someone who has been so kind to them.
I was totally shocked that it was a person that had been trusted in their home. It was a person that Manu had assisted with tutoring and personal family issues that were going on with him.
Was robbery the motive? Was revenge the motive? I don't think we'll ever know unless Mullins decides to tell us why he did what he did.
The only thing I can think of is he felt that if he killed Melanie's mother, that it would break her heart. A twisted revenge is the only thing I can think of.
It tore me apart, and my dad was, of course, completely torn apart. You know, they were supposed to spend the rest of their lives together.
I love to smile, I love to laugh, I love to make jokes, but I haven't laughed for smiled like I did with her and since it happened. There are generally two types of love. The one type is where you've been with somebody for a very long time, so you got that deep love. And then you got the other kind of love, which is the infatuation type love. And I had both of those for my wife. There is no such thing as moving on from it. I'm making progress, and my kids are making progress, but I'll never move on. That day would be stuck in my head till the day I die.
I wanted to grow up to be just like my mom, because I saw that she was a strong, kind woman that helped everyone she could, and she was nice to everyone, no matter who they were. I miss how she was always pushing me to do my best. I really miss her support.
A young mother on the verge of a new beginning.
She always used to talk about her wedding. She had everything planned out.
She was gonna be living the life that she's always dreamt of having.
Violently struck down.
Not just homicide, but an act of rage.
I had no idea why somebody would want to do that.
Police chase a deranged killer down a sinister path.
He was a big heroin dealer in Jackson. Someone burnt the house down.
Through a maze of twisted theories.
Maybe this was a retaliation.
That was probably self-induced.
You mean suicide?
Yeah.
Until the case takes a mind-bending turn.
He looked at me and said, "You have it all wrong."
That person never was on our radar.
Just an epic tragedy.
I was almost in disbelief.
That's just something that was entirely unexpected from the beginning.
Until we try to rule them in or rule them out, I don't know that any of us are safe.
On Sunday, August 10th, 2014, in an upper-middle-class neighborhood in Jackson, Michigan, a quiet morning is broken by a desperate phone call.
Our dispatch did receive a 911 call from a panicked individual.
911. Yeah, I need somebody up to my house right now. My fiance, I think she's dead.
Okay, so has she been sick?
No, there's blood everywhere.
Do you know where it's coming from?
I don't know.
Okay, can you tell if she's breathing?
She's not. She's cold. She's dead. Oh my God.
Police race to the home just before 11 a.m., where they're greeted by the caller and 3 young girls.
He had said that the deceased body was up in a bedroom upstairs. There was 2 bedrooms that we walked past, which were bedrooms where the kids had been sleeping.
With the 3 children who lived there safely out of the house and the crime scene locked down, detectives come upon a grisly sight.
As we enter the bedroom, then we do see the body. It was slumped down between the bed and the wall. And there was quite a bit of blood. At that point, we see zip ties on her hands, and we see what appears to be several stab marks.
A zip tie was wrapped around each wrist, with another looped through it and cut, as though she'd been strapped to the bed and then cut loose.
We, at that point, determined we likely had a homicide.
The police talk to Eric Wolf, who placed the 911 call. He tells them the victim is his fiancée, 28-year-old Frances Craig. He also makes a startling admission.
He said that he had worked all night, so when he came home, after finding Franny in the condition she was in, he then went downstairs and slept on the recliner chair. For whatever reason, he did not call 911 until a couple hours later in the morning.
Frances's 2 daughters and Eric's little girl were all in the house at the time. While Eric slept, his 10-year-old child walked into a horrifying scene.
Eric's daughter, Lexi, went into the bedroom and clearly could tell that something was amiss. She even touched her and could tell that she was not moving. I think she might even have described her as a little cold.
Lexi went downstairs and woke up her father. And that's when he finally called 911.
We all felt that a normal, average individual would, at the bare minimum, make sure their fiance, the person they're about to get married to and spend the rest of their life with, is okay.
Eric's decision to walk away from the murder scene is a red flag for investigators. And so is his casual demeanor.
When Eric was interviewed by one of the other detectives at the scene initially, the detective said he didn't seem too concerned, didn't seem too upset about what had happened.
Detectives plan to grill Eric about his suspicious behavior. But first, they need to finish processing the crime scene.
There was approximately 90 stab wounds, and they were in a very aggressive manner.
It was overkill. Not just committing a homicide, but an act of rage where it's over the top.
The rule of thumb is on a situation where there's multiple, and I'm talking more than a dozen stab wounds, it's usually a crime of passion. So at that point, you typically look at somebody close to the victim.
Investigators sift through the bloody mess for clues. There's no sign of a murder weapon, but plenty of signs of conflict.
The crime lab, which is the CSI people, they responded to the scene. They were there for multiple hours, collecting a ton of evidence.
While the forensics team works the scene inside, shocked friends and family have gathered outside the house.
I didn't believe her. I thought it was a lie. It's not real. It didn't happen.
I had no idea why somebody would want to do that. Francis was just an amazing person all around. Francis and I worked together. We hung out outside of work together. We would hang out with our kids.
Investigators learned that Francis had 2 daughters with an ex-boyfriend. The oldest is 5 years old, and the youngest is 3.
Our boyfriends actually were friends, and he brought her to my house one day, and that was like the beginning of a beautiful friendship. It felt like we've known each other for years. She's a wonderful, amazing mom, the best mom that I know. She was the best person I've ever met and known in my life.
She would do anything for anyone.
Francis and the father of her children broke up, but she still dreamed of getting married.
She always used to talk about her wedding and everything, and at this point, she didn't even have a boyfriend. She had everything planned out.
Dreams became reality in 2012 when she started dating 29-year-old Eric Wolf.
Eric was a divorced single father, 1 young child. He had primary custody over her.
2 years into the relationship, Eric and Francis moved in together. Despite working 2 jobs, Francis did all she could to make time for her children and Eric's daughter, too.
She was constantly doing things with her girls when she wasn't working. Even with her stepdaughter, she was amazing.
Her days were long, but her life was full. Eric proposed, and the couple bought a house together.
Frances was very, very excited about getting married. Like, every day she was tagging me on Facebook or, like, sending me pictures. You know, she thought she was gonna be living the life that she's always dreamt of having and having that fairy tale wedding.
But when detectives pressed Franny's friends, they learn that Eric had a dark side.
They told me that they weren't super fond of her fiance.
Because my daughter spent a lot of time with Francis. She was like a second mother to my daughter. And my daughter did tell me several times of Eric being kind of like a drill sergeant. He seemed real cocky, just everything was about him and his daughter more so than Francis and her girls. I felt in my gut from the moment I found out that something happened to Francis, I felt like Eric had something to do with it. I didn't know what, I didn't know how, I didn't know why. I just felt like it was because of him that she's gone.
Police are determined to get to the bottom of Eric's suspicious behavior.
When we interviewed him, he stated when he saw her in the condition she was in, he did not call 911, and he didn't seem too upset about what had happened. At that point, he was somebody, definitely a person of interest in the homicide of Franny Craig.
Coming up, Eric's story gets stranger by the minute.
I didn't know if this was, like self-inflicted accident.
That's what we need to find out too.
A tiny clue reveals a big surprise.
There was DNA found on Franny's zip tie.
And when police find the killer, it shocks everyone.
I remember thinking to myself, I'm glad we're sitting down right now.
After calling 911 following the brutal murder of his fiancée, Frances Craig, Eric Wolf is questioned by police about how he discovered his fiancée's body.
I came home this morning because I work 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. I went upstairs, I checked both the girls' rooms before going in our bedroom.
Okay, so you came around to the foot of the bed and kind of looked
Yes.
to see where she was at.
That's exactly what I did.
Okay. Did you see anything on the mattress when you first came in?
I saw, I guess I might have saw that streak, but it didn't jump out like blood or anything.
Okay, so you saw something that just didn't jump out to you.
Yeah,
So this is bad.
Eric did not seem to register surprise, anger, hurt, anything that I think we all normally would want to see from a loved one when somebody is killed.
I thought maybe she had been drinking or something because she was in almost like a funny position on the floor, which she doesn't drink hardly ever. I knew better than to wake her. I know from prior experience whenever I've woken her up, she's not a morning person and I get yelled at.
As the interview creeped close to an hour, Eric suggests a much darker reason for ignoring his fiancée sprawled out on the bedroom floor.
Up until just now, maybe since we've been here, I thought that if it wasn't an accident, then it was probably self-induced.
You mean suicide?
Yeah.
He indicated that he thought maybe she had committed suicide and just did not want to deal with it at that point. We found that being very odd and a red flag. Typically on a suicide, you'll find one stab wound or one gunshot wound. You won't find multiple stab wounds.
The prospect of Franny inflicting 90 stab wounds with her hands zip-tied sounds preposterous to the police. Even if it was physically possible, why wouldn't Eric have reacted with alarm?
So you didn't want to come to grips with it if she had done so.
Right, because
you don't want to.
To investigators, Eric's shifting story doesn't add up. Why would a woman everyone described as happy and carefree take her own life?
And the only reason I say self-induced is just because of how high-strung everything is right before this wedding, and
it's a lot of stress.
Yeah.
Eric's strange comments could signal that he's traumatized over the death of his fiancée, or that he's hiding something. Determined to mine the truth, detectives decide to go right at their prime suspect.
Did you?
No.
Know what?
No, I didn't do this. I didn't know anything about it. I walked in and I walked out, went to sleep, got up, went back in and reported it.
But that brings me back to the questions we just asked. You made it at least halfway into that bedroom.
I did make it, and I admit that, and I'll admit that in front of whoever needs to hear it. But I want to make that perfectly clear that my stance on this is exactly what I said. I went in for whatever reason it was. I didn't react.
Without forensic evidence to hold him, Eric is free to go. But investigators vow to keep their eye on him. And the deeper they look, the more circumstantial evidence starts to build up.
We did do a pretty thorough background, as we always do. And one thing we found out is that Eric did have a little bit of assaultive past with prior girlfriends and an ex-wife. It seems like he has some violent tendencies.
One of the strangest facts in this case is that Eric Wolf has a father who is serving a life sentence in prison for his own first-degree murder conviction.
He was convicted on a cold case homicide investigation in the 90s and was serving life in prison for murder. So that certainly put up a red flag to us.
Was it possible that violent tendencies run in the family? Even if they did, what possible reason would Eric have to want his fiancée dead?
The homicide occurred in August, and I believe their wedding was planned in September. We talked with her parents and her friends. They told me that Franny had second thoughts, and they were trying to convince her that if she was not prepared to get married, that maybe she should wait. And they also said Eric had second thoughts. Eric may have got cold feet, didn't want to get married, didn't know how to end the relationship.
While police work diligently to prove Eric's guilt, Francis's friends wait and wonder.
We didn't know what was going on. Nobody knew what was going on and what happened with Frances and how she was murdered. We just knew she was dead.
Behind the scenes, police work tirelessly. They obtain a search warrant to collect Francis's and Eric's electronics, but quickly realize that Francis's cell phone is missing.
We do find the cell phone near Franny's house. It had been thrown up against a tree and damaged. Again, we're thinking that the cell phone has some pretty valuable information.
The cellular phone data quite often can be some of the most compelling evidence.
We were able to get the phone records, and nothing really stuck out as being her, Franny communicating with anybody that would give us suspicion.
With no unusual cell phone activity or signs of forced entry on the day of the murder, police stay focused on Eric.
Eric Wolf at the time was at work, and investigators went and checked out, what they could to verify his alibi.
Police checked the company's security cameras.
They do have one entrance. They do have a time card check-in, check-out system. We were able to verify he was at work, or allegedly at work, when the incident occurred. The problem with the system is there's some other exits that they're not supposed to use, but some of them have cameras, but other ones do not.
Was he able to leave his place of employment and get home to commit a murder and have all of that be undetected? Eric was the only person we could figure who would have any reason to want Franny dead.
Police investigating the homicide of 28-year-old Frances Craig cannot confirm her fiancé's alibi, since not every exit at his workplace had a security camera.
We couldn't rule out that sometime during the night he left and then came back.
Eric's shaky alibi and suspicious behavior at the crime scene doesn't give police enough to arrest him, but it does leave them with a drastic course of action.
If you are operating in a murder investigation thinking that man killed his fiancée in the home where the children were, you are thinking, we want to keep the children safe. We kept Eric's daughter from him while we tried to figure out what happened to Franny.
Both Eric's and Franny's daughters are removed from Eric's home and put in the custody of family members. With pressure mounting, detectives need to move fast to prove their theory or find a more plausible one.
At that point, we try to determine any communication Franny may have been having with someone other than her fiancé.
Franny had an ex-boyfriend. He no longer lived in the area, but he had returned to the area recently and had some level of connection or interaction with Franny.
The police press Franny's ex. Could he have committed this heinous crime?
That young man was a nice young man, came from a very, very nice family.
And he did have an alibi where he was at the time of the incident. We were able to verify that alibi, so we were able to eliminate him.
If no one in Frances's immediate circle wished her harm, what about her coworkers? Detectives learned that while Frances worked at a retail store, she was involved in a frightening incident.
Where Franny was working, there was a couple shoplifters that had stolen some clothing. She confronted them.
The confrontation turned to violence when the mother of the two young shoplifters jumped in, attacking Frances. The assault left Frances with a severe eye injury, as well as emotional scars.
The incident at work left Frances really scared, nervous, cautious.
The mother of the shoplifters was actually criminally charged for a crime for the assault, some type of unarmed robbery. She was convicted.
So there was some concern that maybe this was a retaliation for that situation.
We did surprise them with a visit. They did have alibis on where they would have been at that time that the incident occurred.
Investigators are able to verify those alibis, eliminating the women as suspects. Frustrated detectives are still hoping that DNA from the crime scene will help them find the killer. But while they wait for results from the crime lab, the people of Jackson attend Franny's funeral, their emotions raw from the news of her violent death.
Her mail carrier showed up to her funeral because she left such an impact on that person. That's how loved and how missed Frances Craig is.
This was definitely a shock to the community because we don't have that many homicides.
I was scared. I just didn't know what to expect.
I was afraid to leave the house. I was afraid to do anything because we still had no answers as to what happened.
The overwhelming feeling was the pressure we were under to get this right.
Determined to find justice for Franny, investigators continue to drill down on Frances's fiancé. Hoping for an inside look at Eric Wolf, they bring in one of the couple's former roommates.
Ryan Marshall was friends with Eric Wolf. So Eric and Franny welcomed Ryan into their home to stay with them.
His house had caught on fire, and she was trying to help a friend out.
He lived with them until April of 2014. The homicide happened August of 2014, so he had a pretty good knowledge of the two of them. He said everything was good, and he actually vouched for Eric, saying Eric was a really good guy and a friend for a long time, and doesn't feel that Eric would ever do anything to harm Franny.
Speaking with Ryan doesn't give police new reasons to suspect Eric. but it doesn't clear him either.
3 months in, we've pretty much eliminated everybody of interest, anyone close to Franny other than Eric. But we don't have enough evidence to present to the prosecutor.
But then, a new piece of information arrives that brings a new suspect into the spotlight.
There was DNA found on Franny's zip tie.
Three months after Francis Craig's murder, the lab results from the crime scene finally arrive. And they provide a huge break in the case.
We're notified through a national index. The DNA located on the zip ties matched DNA in a database.
When somebody commits a felony, they have to submit to a DNA test. Somebody's DNA showed up on the zip ties that were used in the homicide. We get a name of Cortez Butler.
Who is Cortez Butler? Police waste no time looking into his criminal record.
We find out Cortez Butler served approximately 25 years for murder and was currently on parole in the Detroit area.
But we knew almost nothing else. We tried to determine if we could connect Cortez Butler to Franny Craig, to Eric Wolf, and we came up with nothing. We tried to determine if he had family locally, and we came up with nothing.
In fact, Cortez Butler appears to have no connection to Jackson whatsoever.
So we look in our database to see if we have any Cortez Butlers in any police report we've done, any place in Jackson County, and we find none.
Then it was this mad scramble of, well, then how do we even tie Cortez Butler to this? For all we know, he may have worked at Home Depot, and his DNA may be on these zip ties for a completely innocent reason.
The investigators connected with Cortez's parole officer. They got Cortez's phone number. A search warrant was prepared and signed for Cortez Butler's phone records. We learned that Cortez Butler's phone was in Jackson on the early morning hours of August 10th, the actual time of the murder. The rest of those phone records almost exclusively placed it in and around the greater Detroit area, never in Jackson.
But what reason would Butler have to harm Franny?
Eric remained the prime suspect. He was the only dude with a motive.
Maybe Eric was not ready to get married and didn't know how to end a relationship.
So then the thought process was, did Eric hire this person to kill Franny?
The cell phone records also connect Butler to some other shady characters.
We were able to identify a Clifford and Rodney McKee as being connected to Cortez Butler. Clifford McKee lived in the Detroit area. Clifford McKee was in prison for approximately 20 years for murder. We found out that Rodney McKee, he was a big heroin dealer in Jackson. We found out that he had committed arson.
The arson that Rodney McKee perpetrated was against Donna and Ryan Marshall.
The police are stunned. Ryan Marshall is Eric Wolf's friend, the one who had been welcomed into Franny and Eric's home after his house burned down. But what kind of a connection could Ryan possibly have to a drug dealer like Rodney McKee?
Ryan Marshall's mother had been a heroin dealer for Rodney McKee.
But after months of dealing for Rodney, Ryan's mother decided she wanted out.
Donna Marshall refused to sell heroin for Rodney McKee.
Rodney didn't like to be told no.
Ryan's mother, Donna, held her ground, but Rodney retaliated.
Rodney McKee attempted to burn down a house with Ryan Marshall and his mother in it.
Ryan witnessed it all. He then contacted the police.
What was the connection between Eric Wolf, Cortez Butler, the Marshalls, and a drug dealer from Detroit? Detectives knew there was only one person who could answer the question, and soon they'd have a chance to ask him face to face.
Cortez Butler was arrested for yet another murder. Not Franny's murder, but another murder in the greater Detroit area.
We went down there in Detroit with one sole purpose: to gather information from Cortez Butler on what happened to Franny and hopefully be able to explain to us what Eric's role in this whole thing was. But Cortez said he wasn't going to talk without any kind of a deal.
It was clear that whatever Cortez was going to say, it was not going to be, quote unquote, on the record.
Investigators have DNA evidence and phone records that link convicted killer Cortez Butler to Francis Craig's murder. They arrange to talk to him while he's detained for an unrelated homicide. But he immediately tries to shut them down.
Cortez said he wasn't going to talk without any kind of a deal. I said, no one is giving you any kind of a deal without anyone knowing what you have to say.
Detectives press Butler hard until he finally agrees to talk. But only on one condition.
Cortez very pointedly and specifically asked repeatedly to not have the interview recorded.
If detectives agree not to record the interview, there's a chance Butler's testimony won't stand up in court. Still, with no other leads in the case, they decide to roll the dice.
We were there interviewing Cortez in the first place because we need to find out Eric Wolf's involvement in this. And it was dire that we did so as the children were about to go back with Eric Wolf. The whole idea for that was to keep these kids safe.
So the detectives tried to read him his rights. He didn't even want to be bothered with the rights. I know my rights. I think it was, bro, I know my rights, bro.
Butler wastes no time getting right to the point.
Cortez looked at me and said, "You have it all wrong." And I said, "Have what all wrong?" And he, at that time, let us know that Eric had absolutely nothing to do with this murder.
He goes, "I don't know this dude you're talking about, know nothing about him. Just trust me, he was not involved in this whatsoever."
The statement contradicts one of the investigators' strongest leads, but the next thing Butler says is even more explosive.
Cortez identifies himself as the killer. I remember thinking to myself, I'm glad we're sitting down right now, because I was almost in disbelief.
If Eric wasn't involved, why had this cold-blooded criminal murdered a woman to whom he had no obvious connection? It all went back to Rodney McKee's arson case.
Rodney McKee attempted to burn down a house with Ryan Marshall and his mother in it. Ryan Marshall was a key witness in his arson case.
He made some threats to Ryan that either he not agree to testify or he was going to be killed.
Cortez told us that he had been hired by Rodney McKee to kill Ryan Marshall.
First, Butler had to find Ryan, who was homeless because of the fire.
So we found out from Cortez Butler that they had bad information. They had information that Ryan Marshall was living with Francis Craig and Eric Wolf.
Cortez Butler entered Francis and Eric's house to kill someone who was no longer there.
Franny wasn't even the intended target. Franny was as innocent of a victim as anybody could ever be. When he opened the door, he had made the decision that he was killing somebody while he was there.
He doesn't have to force entry. He gets into the house. He noticed the bedrooms have some kids in it. He walks past them, and he goes to Franny Craig's room. When he gets to Franny Craig's room, he asks her where Ryan is. She said he's not there. Cortez tells Franny not to look at him. In his words, he stated she looked at him, so he had to kill her.
The horrific details that Cortez reveals next leave detectives with no doubt about the guilt of the man sitting across from them.
He decided to bind her, trying to get information from her, but she would not cooperate.
Cortez stabbed her multiple times.
We will never know how long he took to torture her and butcher her. And it clearly took time and effort to stab and slice her in the manner that he did. She died in the service of keeping Ryan's identity and his location secret, and/or she quite frankly just didn't know.
Cortez Butler's chilling confession is nothing short of a game changer, both for detectives and for Eric Wolf.
It eliminated our hypothesis that Eric Wolf was responsible for Franny's death.
Eric wasn't involved. He's an odd duck kind of guy.
Eric was able to regain custody of his daughter.
I took from this case that we can never jump to conclusions. I was pretty convinced that he did it, not to the point that I could charge him, but I was pretty convinced I had the right person.
Now that investigators do have the right person, they're determined to put Cortez Butler away for life. But all of that is in jeopardy.
I didn't believe that Cortez's confession would be legally admissible in court because it wasn't recorded. And if Cortez Butler ever walked free again, I don't know that any of us are safe.
After months of dead ends, investigators finally have a confession from Francis Craig's killer. But prosecutors are concerned that his testimony may not hold up in court.
I was concerned that it would be legally inadmissible because it wasn't recorded. He was basically told, we're not planning to use this in court against you. I was concerned that he had not been properly advised of his Miranda rights. But we still had his DNA on the zip ties and the cell phone records. So I kept thinking, and I finally got myself legally to a point where I was convinced that we need to give this a shot.
In October of 2015, Cortez Butler is charged with Francis's murder. When the trial begins 6 months later, Butler appears relaxed, almost giddy.
Cortez really seemed to thrive in that trial atmosphere. He would seek out cameras and smile at them, give them this big, full-teeth smile.
He wanted to fight just because he could. He wanted to run the show just because he could.
But that's just a warm-up for the verbal assault he launches into when he takes the stand.
Cortez Butler was a monster at that trial. He bragged on how many bodies he had. It was unbearable.
Butler gleefully describes his murderous past in gory detail. But when asked about killing Frances, he fiercely denies it.
He clearly was so excited to say why he didn't commit this murder, because he pleads to all of his murders, and he clearly didn't commit this one because he didn't plead to it.
Butler also denies ever confessing to police. But in a victory for prosecutors, the judge allows detectives to testify about Butler's confession.
We're able to get past that piece because he wasn't in custody for our case. He wasn't actually entitled to his Miranda warnings.
Eyewitness accounts play a major role in trying to move the jury, beginning with Eric's daughter, who found Franny dead.
Alexis was our first witness up there, and I don't know that I will ever forget the audible gasps and sobs and emotion pouring from the jury just from that first witness.
The physical evidence is laid out.
We have Cortez Butler's DNA on the zip ties that were used in the homicide, and we also have phone tracking information showing Cortez Butler and Jackson.
Prosecutors make a compelling case, but without a recording of Butler's confession. It's the detective's word against Butler's. When the jury returns with the verdict, there's no guarantee which way the cards will fall.
Cortez Butler was convicted of first-degree murder, and he won't ever walk free again.
The sentence was life without the possibility of parole for the premeditation murder of Franny Craig.
This was a complicated story to tell to a jury. It is a difficult one for all of us to wrap our brains around, even still.
Cortez goes to look for Ryan at her house, and he doesn't find him, and murders Franny in her own bed while she's doing nothing wrong.
Franny had no connection to her killer whatsoever. We can rest maybe a little easier that the bad guys won't ever hurt anybody else, at least not outside of the walls of prison. But none of it brings Franny back.
Today, Frances's two daughters live with their father. Those closest to Frances do everything they can to hold on to her memory.
Franny's family, I know, they've been lost ever since. I've been lost ever since Frances has been murdered.
I want people to remember how happy of a person she was, how generous, how nice and kind she was.
I miss Frances so much, and there's not a day that goes by that I do not think about her. I know that she's watching over everybody and making sure that everybody's good, because that's the type of person she was.
I wish I had known her, and I hope I honored her in my handling of this case.
For more information on an unexpected killer, go to oxygen.com.